Hi everyone, we are streaming live on our city's YouTube page. We are just waiting a few more minutes to make sure everybody that registered can join the meeting. There's a couple more outstanding, but we'll get started in a few minutes regardless and add them as they come in. So just be patient, we'll be right with you. Okay, it looks like everybody at this point has submitted. It's probably going to be on, and again, I'll be watching that after my brief introduction to make sure everybody can be added on. We are live streaming on the city's website or at the YouTube page, which is www.cityoflaverne.org/stream. So with that, I'd like to first thank you all for participating in the meeting this evening. We do ask for your patience with the technical side of this. This is the first webinar that we've hosted. So we practiced a little bit, but still it's a new process for us internally. So we'll start with the introductions of those that are on the call, the panelists. I'll start with myself. My name is Eric Scher. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Laverne. I'll be trying to manage the technical background side of this meeting this evening. But with me is Candace. Candace, self-introduction, please.
Hello, my name is Candace Bocock. I'm the principal planner here at the City of Laverne and the project planner for this specific project.
Matt.
My name is Matt Waken. I'm with MW Investment Group and I'm the project developer.
Christine. You're muted.
Thank you, Matt. This is Christine Donahue with Rincon Consultants. We are the city's consultant that's preparing the environmental documentation for the project.
And Brian, you're also muted.
This is Brian Crawford with Gandini Group, and I am the traffic consultant for the project.
Thank you, everybody. So as most of you on this meeting are aware, this virtual meeting is occurring at the direction of our planning commission, who held a public hearing on the proposed residential development on Amherst Street on February 24th. The purpose of this meeting is to try to answer any outstanding questions that you may have about the project. There are no decision makers on this meeting and no decisions will be made today. Typically, this is the meeting that we would introduce the project to the neighborhood at the early stages, but as most of you are aware, the details of the project at this point, we'll try to focus more on providing further information, most notably on the traffic analysis. I'm going to explain technically how this is going to work and how you're going to be able to participate as an attendee of the meeting. Let me just check to make sure nobody else has requested to register. 1 second, please. Oh, good. You should have received an agenda from Candace outlining today's meeting. First, Candace is going to explain the planning department's role in processing the applications. Then Matt Waken, the applicant, will explain the project. Lastly, and probably most importantly, Christine and Brian, the independent environmental consultants, will explain the EIR that was prepared, which is still in a draft form at this point, and really provide specific details on the traffic analysis that was done for the project. We recognize that we didn't go into the depth of detail for the traffic analysis that maybe some of the residents were expecting at the planning commission meeting. So we hope to spend a lot of time on that subject this evening to hopefully answer some of those specific questions. Understand that you and even city staff are not, registered traffic engineers. So it is a technical document. So we're going to try our best to try to explain it in an easy way. At the end of each person's presentation, we're going to stop for questions regarding that specific presentation. For example, if you have questions regarding traffic, which is the last part of the presentation, please wait until after the presentation on traffic studies provided. Obviously, asking questions on traffic before the presentation, we're not going to be able to really provide answers until after the presentation. We also ask that everybody remains respectful during this time. I understand many of you are simply opposed to the project as proposed, and as I said, there are no decision makers participating tonight, and no decisions will be made. I encourage you to ask questions of the applicant or the environmental consultants tonight instead of just stating your opposition or support for the project. Those comments have and will continue to be provided to the Planning Commission, who will be making a recommendation on the City Council during an upcoming public hearing, which Candace will talk about shortly. Those same comments are also shared with the City Council once they have their public meeting, also at a later date. So technically, if you'd like to ask a question, at the bottom of your screen, there is a raise hand function for those participants on Zoom. Once you have a question, please go ahead and raise your hand. Once we get to questions and answers period, you'll be brought into the room one at a time. You can turn your video on or off, but you might need to unmute yourself at that time. We don't have any formal time limits, but we ask that you try to keep your questions brief. We have about 25 people that registered. Right now, we have about 14 people that are attending the meeting. But we're still checking to make sure that there aren't more requests coming in as the meeting has started. And so far, we're still here. Others might want to participate by phone. So there was a deadline for to register to be on the Zoom at noon today. And we recognize that was early in the day, but this is being the first time that we've done this process and the registration process. For those of you that are on the call, understand it's been several emails back and forth to get you the link to be here. So we will be providing, in future meetings, we will probably narrow that deadline closer to the actual meeting start date. But today was just an example of us having to prepare for this meeting, plus the other meetings that Candace and I were in that weren't related to this project this afternoon, didn't really give us time to just devote to this meeting this evening. Whoever you direct your question to or whatever topic it's related to, will ask the panelists on the video now to provide an answer to the best of their ability. We will allow you to ask a follow-up question as well based on that response. But if other people have their hands raised and are waiting to be part of ask their own questions, we'll move you back to the attendee room so you can continue to watch the video. But and then you can raise your hand again if you have a different question. And once it comes back to your turn, we'll bring you back in. So one initial question, response, ability to ask a follow-up question if you have one on that topic, and then we'll move you back in the room and allow the next person to speak. There is a slight lag when we move you in and out of the room, we found in our practice session. So don't worry if your screen changes a little bit or the video goes away when you're being moved. It'll automatically come back in a few seconds. We do ask that you try to refrain from repeating the questions that have already been asked. Obviously, if we get the same question a few times, the answer is not going to be different than it was the first couple of times. And again, for those that did not register in time to be on the Zoom meeting, you can still participate by watching the live stream on YouTube at www.cityoflaverne.org/stream. If you wish to speak over the phone, please email your phone number to planning@cityoflaverne.org, and we will call you towards the end of the meeting so you can speak over the phone and you do not have to participate via Zoom. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Candace for her first presentation. And I'm going to go mute and turn my video off so I can continue to manage the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see my screen here? Are we good?
Yes, it looks good on my side.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this virtual neighborhood workshop for the Amherst housing proposal. Again, I am Candace Bocock, Principal Planner with the City of La Verne, and I'll be talking about what the entitlement process looks like and the different planning applications that are required for this type of project. First, I'll start out with a brief overview of the background and how this project got started. Okay, in the beginning of 2018, the City Council conducted a fiscal sustainability study to address increasing costs. Through this process, Council agreed to sell a portion of the land that the city owns for the Amherst water treatment facility, specifically the portions of the site that are currently leased to a commercial nursery. In October of 2018, the city conducted an appraisal for the property and presented the appraisal to the council 2 months later. In March of 2019, the city released an RFP to residential developers, with the city receiving 5 proposals. After reviewing the proposals, the council elected to proceed with MW Investment Group on entering a purchase and sale agreement for the 5.6 acres of land. This next slide just shows the property that we are talking about. It is outlined in yellow. It shows the site. The water treatment facility is right there on Amherst and Williams, and the proposed development site is where the West Covina Wholesale Nursery is today, with the outlined in yellow. So the project applications, there are 5 applications that are required for this proposal, including a precise plan review for the design and site plan, a tree removal for the protected deodar cedar on site, the general plan amendment changing the site from low to medium density, a zone change changing the zoning from PR3D to specific plan, and a specific plan to adopt a new development standards, a vesting tentative track map to create individual lots, and the certification of the EIR. The next slides will talk a little bit more about these applications. The first being the zone change. This is just a visual. So you can see the project site is currently zoned planned residential, 3 detached units per acre. The applicant has proposed that this site plan be rezoned for a new specific plan, the Amherst specific plan, which would permit medium density residential 8 units per acre. This slide shows a little bit out of the specific plan, some of the development standards and the requirements. The proposed specific plan design standards would help ensure that residential dwellings constructed would be compatible with the adjacent uses. The chart shows some of the standards. The highlights are the minimum lot size of 3,350 square feet, 2-story high max, 20-foot minimum setbacks for the driveway to ensure each house has a usable driveway to park cars, 15-foot rear setback, 10-foot building separation, and 50% lot coverage. The developer will talk more about this project specifics and a little bit more about this in his presentation, but that's the point of the specific plan, is to have these development standards. This slide shows the general plan amendment in a visual form. The general plan currently designates the site as low density residential, which is 0 to 5 units per acre. The applicant is proposing to amend the general plan map to redesignate the site as medium density residential, which is 0 to 10 units per acre. The proposed project would be consistent with the land use element policy 3.5 and implementation measures, as these policies and measures encourage creative developments. The change to medium density residential is also consistent with the immediately adjacent properties to the east and south, which also have a medium density residential designation. The next slide talks a little bit about the vesting tentative tract map that's proposed. It would allow for the 5.6 acre parcel of land to construct or to divide it into 42 individual lots, along with common lots and the street and park area to be owned by the HOA. The environmental impact report, which we'll call the EIR, the city released an RFP for an independent environmental consultant to conduct an environmental review of the project according to CEQA. Proposals were received and Rincon consultants were selected by the city. Rincon completed an initial study that identified the need for an EIR. Christine from Rincon is here to talk a little bit more about those specifics, like Eric said, regarding CEQA and the EIR, and more specifically dive into a little bit more details in the traffic. I wanted to also mention the Bodwin Street reopening. Although not proposed as part of this project, the city has received scoping comments indicating support for and opposition to the reopening of the Bodwin Street intersection at Williams Avenue. Based on the draft EIR, the project does not require the reopening of this intersection, and any consideration of the reopening would involve city council outside of this project proposal. There was a city council meeting held on March 1st to discuss this matter separately from the project, and the council voted to wait to make any decisions at this time and directed the matter to the Active Transportation Committee, who will reevaluate, and the city council will reevaluate this, the reopening decision at a later date after they get some of the committee input and after a decision is made on this project. And I did want to talk a little bit about some of the public outreach that the city has done so far. The municipal code requires that the city notice property owners within 500 feet of the subject property. Understanding that this project would have significant neighborhood interest, staff extended the noticing to up to 800 feet from the project site. There were additional residents beyond the 800 feet that expressed some interest in the project, and they were also added to the mailing and emailing lists, so they have also been notified. The city was prepared to have an in-person workshop with the public. However, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, these types of meetings were not and are still not allowed to occur under state and county orders. So as an alternative, staff created a dedicated webpage for the city on the City of Laverne's website for anyone to look for any information regarding the project. Also, the notice for this workshop, this virtual workshop, and the next Planning Commission meeting was mailed out on February 25th. So with that, if anyone has any questions or comments regarding the process, the city process, this would be the time where you would, I believe, virtually raise your hand, and Eric would let you in.
Candace, so you could stop screen share for a second so we go back to full screen. Thank you.
There we go.
And Denise, you are in the room, so if you unmute yourself and if you want to turn your video on, you may do so and address the room.
And unmute myself. There we go. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. I just had one question right now about this is it's mentioned that this lot size is 5.6 acres, but on the city's website, I looked today and it's showing it as 5.3 acres. So I'm not sure which is correct. It was put on there February 18th, and it says that the remaining 5.3 acres of the Amherst parcel is currently undeveloped government land currently occupied by a private nursery. So is it 5.3 or is it 5.6? Because one figure is incorrect.
Matt, can you address the acreage discrepancies?
Yeah, it's 5.6.
Okay, then this looks like you guys just need to make that change on your website. Okay, that's all I have for right this second.
Thank you.
So a little bit of a lag. I'm getting used to how I move people in and out. So sorry, the next person, we have two more questions. Hi, Patty, you're in the room. If you want to unmute yourself and turn your video on if you'd like, go ahead.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. One, with the change to the general plan, the other projects have been so vehemently decided we would not change the general plan, for instance, the one up at the golf course, that would not be compatible with our community to put the homes up there, which I agree with. But how come we can so easily change the general plan and the zoning for this project that I think is just as damaging to the surrounding community?
So in this case, the general plan designates the area surrounding, or not surrounding it, but on the south and the east as mobile, it's the mobile home park, and that's zoned medium density residential. So I think if you're going to compare it to the golf course, it's a little bit different, as there is adjacent general plan designation that we would be turning it into.
Patty, I'd also add to that, and I understand your question, especially your involvement with the General Plan Advisory Committee. This isn't a city-initiated zone change, right, or a general plan amendment. It's because the developer is proposing it. So the city is required to process that and make a recommendation, which staff's recommendation at this time is to approve that request. But it's not city-initiated like we had discussed with the general plan update, where the city would be the one at the forefront changing designations. But any applicant can always request such a consideration.
Okay, right, I understand that. Okay, I have, it's not really a follow-up, but it's in with the same thing. I hope I can ask it. They say you say in the plan, you just went through your thing, Candace, that there's a 20-foot driveway. My concern, and I don't know if there's anything that can be addressed on this, we personally own a truck that's 22 feet from head to toe. It's, yes, a large 1-ton pickup truck, but if we lived there, the vehicle wouldn't fit either in the garage or on the driveway. It seems a little short. Has that been a consideration at all?
20 feet is standard, and that is what we require for a 2-car garage, is 20 by 20. So I'm not sure that we could require more. And Eric, do you have something to add?
Just that there is also the additional sidewalk width behind the driveway approach. So it's not, the car wouldn't be hanging out in the street. It would still be, if you had a 22-foot vehicle, which is rare. Most vehicles are under 20 feet in length.
Yes.
But it would be blocking a portion of the sidewalk, but not necessarily, it wouldn't be into the street, because that's a 5-foot sidewalk, I believe, Candace, right?
Yeah.
So then would those people receive tickets for blocking the sidewalk?
So it's not a public sidewalk. But it depends on how the CCNRs are written, where police department can enforce certain vehicle code sections based on the CCNRs, but it is not a public street or sidewalk. So more than likely, not really, unless they ask for us to be able to enforce that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Danita, you're on, and you can start speaking when you like. Danita, are you there? You're muted now. Try unmuting, please. There you go. How about now?
Okay.
Oh, you'll want to
My-
mute your YouTube stream, because there's going to be an echo. How about now?
No, that's not.
Danita, we can hear you, so if you want to speak, you should be good.
Okay. My question is about the comparison to the mobile home unit density, that's not comparable to housing density. And they are on the south side of the wash. So I feel like that's an entirely separate quadrant, and they're not part of the existing neighborhood. My other concern is that understanding the city needs to, continue growth and generate funds. Why wasn't the RFP for building homes with the existing PR3D zoning rather than going to medium to high density?
So the first question regarding
Yeah, the low density, according to the zoning map, it's 0 to 3 units is considered low density. So why wasn't the original proposal based on the existing zoning?
Many proposals were received, and this was the proposal that was supported by the city council. Like Eric said in the past question, it's a proposal from a developer. It's not the city's proposal. They can propose whatever density that they choose to. And as far as the general plan or the density comparison to the mobile home park, I would say that the only point the city's trying to make is that the mobile home park general plan designation is the same as what this designation is hoping to change to.
And I will also add, that when the city's RFP went out, it didn't say that they only wanted proposals that were higher. It actually allowed a developer to propose any density, 3 units the acre, 10 units the acre. There was some direction based on the council's direction that they could be supportive around the 6 per acre range, and in terms of a change. But a developer could have proposed 3 units or 1 unit to the acre. And then the city council was the one that evaluated those proposals and select Matt's company to move forward with.
I do have one more question. Why weren't all of the proposals presented on the website pertaining to this project? Why is it only the one that the city council chose?
Well, I'm not sure that those are public records. I'd have to go back and look and check with our city attorney. But typically when those kind of proposals are come in, they are proprietary and confidential, because obviously if you were a developer, you wouldn't want other developers know what kind of submittal and price you were offering, so they could undercut you or try to go against you, right? So those are typically, I think, confidential documents. But I can confirm that with the city attorney before the planning commission meeting to confirm.
Because I'm just think, logically speaking, that they would then present it to the city council. Let's say there's 5 proposals and they reviewed all 5 and they chose one. Obviously it was Matt Waken's proposal, but the other 4 would have been presented to the city council, which makes it public record, assuming that they discussed it at one of the city council meetings.
They were presented to the.
That's what I was wondering.
They were presented to the city council during closed sessions because it's about real property negotiations, and so those are confidential meetings. So the city council did receive all the documents and were able to view them at a closed session meeting, but they weren't provided at a public
meeting. That's the end of my questions pertaining to this part of the agenda.
Thank you. We have 4
Are
more.
you allowed to ask one more question from an additional person who's viewing this?
I think you already moved. Yeah, so if you, Danita, if you're watching and you want to ask another question, you can raise your hand again. Hi, Matt, you're on. If you could please unmute yourself, you should be allowed to start speaking. And again, if you're watching on a different device on YouTube, please mute that at this time, or turn it down so there's not an echo. Again, Mr. Uboko, you're in the waiting room. If you're ready to speak, please unmute your mic.
So, all
There
right.
we go.
There were 5 bids, and I was wondering why you can't redact the names, the price, and all that. But at least we can see what the proposal, the possibility of what you can do with a 5.6 acre. How can that be confidential if you don't really know who the builders are? And a sub question to that would be, how did the council arrive at that decision to pick this developer rather than the other 4 developers based on what? You know, like, how did you arrive at that, and what are the prerequisites to arrive at that decision? That was never made known to us. And at least the council should at least walk the streets and talk to us and get our feeling. What do you think about this and that before they make the decision? I mean, you make a decision and then you come back and say, well, what do you think? Well, you made a decision. What do you think doesn't mean a thing.
So again, I will confirm with the city attorney if they're confidential or if redactions can be made that would make them public. I don't know the answer to that, but I will have an answer. And you know, if they're public documents, we can share those. We're not trying to hide anything. In terms of what the city council was thinking, you will have to ask them that at their meeting when they have their public meeting. We don't speak on behalf of the city council members. You can ask that, pose that question, and have the council members, you know, answer it for themselves.
Yeah, but MW was already chosen. What I'm saying is, if they were to do it before that time, at least they'll know what our thinking is instead of us now fighting over like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? It's water under the bridge. We don't make decisions like that in the business world. If we want to be transparent, okay? If you don't want to be transparent, just say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. We don't care what you say.
So the city council still has to make a decision on the project. If the city council doesn't provide the entitlements for the project, then this property won't close escrow and it won't sell. So the city council still has to make a decision on the project. At the time, they didn't know the specifics of the proposal. There was general concepts that were shared by all the different proposals, but there wasn't a final design plan. That's what happens after the council selected the firm they wish to work with to when the project is then fully vetted out. And Matt will be able to talk about that later during his presentation. But the city council still has a decision to make on this project. So it's not a done deal.
All right, I have one question for council then, is at least tell us what the 5 developers proposed. Like developer 1 said, we can build 30 houses. Developer 2 says we can build 35. We want to know what the ranges are. Are they all 42? Or maybe some are higher? We don't know, you know?
And again, we will share that if we can, but that won't be shared this evening. And the council obviously is not part of this meeting. So we will look into that, we understand.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we have 4 more questions, so please hold on. Mr. Perez, you are in the room. Thank you. If you could go ahead and start speaking now.
Good evening. Yes, I have just a couple of questions. My first question is, if this housing project here in Amherst goes through, we talked about parking. Are the same rules going to apply to them for overnight parking as they do to our community here in the surrounding areas? Because I mean, we all know, we all discussed it here, Denise Fisher, the less cars on the street, less crime. So if the more higher density in this Amherst project, the more people will be in this community. More people, more visitors, more guests. I'm concerned about the density, the higher density versus the medium density, about bringing in more people into the community. So how does the parking apply to them? And yeah, so how does the parking work there?
The parking works the same as it does in the adjacent neighborhoods. There's on-street parking. The only difference is that the street is, like Eric said, it's part of the HOA and managed by the HOA. However, Matt Waken as the applicant has told us that as part of the CCNRs and part of the HOA requirements, that overnight parking would not be permitted, just as it is not in the surrounding community and on public streets. They have 2-car garages. Each unit has 2-car garage. Each unit has 2 cars to put in a driveway. And then there's also on-street parking, just as there is in the surrounding community. So we don't expect it to be a problem.
Okay. My second question for right now, just very simple. I mean, I'm just trying to understand the higher density project versus the medium density project. I mean, what concerns me is that when I listened into the conference or the meeting earlier this month, the developer clearly states he's not going to change his mind from the high density to the lower density. That concerns me, that he has his mind made up, and he made that very clear. So, I mean, why wouldn't you change that? I mean, is he getting more money? Is the city getting more money for 42 units versus 33? I mean, he said it himself. He doesn't feel like lower density is going to be isn't is a good idea. So I'm just concerned about that, like the last gentleman said, is like we weren't transparent. It's like, here it is, this is the decision. Now, what do you guys think now? I'm just scared that the decision's already been made. And, you guys don't live there. And the other gentleman said, he's going to come in, do the project, collect his paycheck and leave. And we're stuck with the mess. I've lived in this community since 1994. I've been here since the 210 freeway was built. I'm in the intersection of Williams and College, and I've experienced high traffic. I've experienced even cars crashing into my house from College, from high traffic. So building this Amherst project is a concern. It is concern for a life. Is Amherst project high density worth a life? And I want Matt to hear that and to answer that. If it was his kids living here, his grandkids living here, would he be okay with that? That's my last question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So Matt will be talking about the density more in his presentation as the applicant. So I think that we'll hold off on talking about the density anymore. It's not part of the city process. So we'll go ahead and leave that for Matt's presentation. And then you did mention high density. It's not high density, it is medium density. So I just wanted to clarify that.
You got it. Okay.
Okay, now we have 5 more questions. I'm gonna let in the people that have not spoken yet first. Hi, Andreas, you're in the room. If you could unmute your device so we can hear you.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Great. No, just want to say there's a lot of work put into this, and I understand the city staff do a lot of work. Specifically, it's the announcements that I'm looking at right now. You said you went ahead and mailed out, I guess you mailed out or notified residents within 800 feet. Was there anything more done? Physically, I'm talking about postings around the immediate neighborhood, besides just putting something up on the website. Was there a secondary or a third series of mailers sent out? Because I've been there for quite a while and I have not seen one thing. So can you expand on that?
So the code requires that there's a 500-foot radius. I'm not sure how far you are from the project site. In one direction, we went a little bit further than we did in the other direction. So when I say 800 feet, it was about 800 feet, but it wasn't quite an 800-foot radius. It was up to 800 feet in some directions. And notices were published in the newspaper. They were published on the city's website. They were mailed. Multiple notices have been mailed. I think at least 4 have been mailed out. So if for some reason you're not getting something, please send me an email and let me know, and you can be added to the list. It's not a problem.
I'll also add that we did post on social media prior to the Planning Commission meeting on all of our social media channels about the Planning Commission meeting. It had like 3,500 impressions. So not necessarily, I understand not everybody's on social media, but it is something else that we did that we don't normally do for projects and public hearings. We promoted it on social media. In addition, anybody that's participated throughout this process back since October, that sent an email, made a phone call, contacted us, they've been added to the list so that we mailed them as well. So anybody that's expressed interest and anybody on this meeting today that hasn't previously expressed interest, is now on the mailing list. And so any future notices will be sent to you and anybody else.
Thank you. I understand that, and I appreciate it. But I only live two houses just west of the site project. And I do have social media accounts, and I am online. However, regarding physical mailing, I have not received one. So I just need to put that out there. I don't know what's going on with that. Go ahead.
Sorry, we will contact you after this meeting and try to figure out why that's happening.
Okay, that's fine. But the other thing that's it's more of a statement now regarding the other residents. I think there was a statement made a few meetings ago about this always happens at the 11th hour. That was a rude statement within itself, because if they're saying I'm sorry to put him out there, Matt Waken is saying that this is happening a lot, then maybe there's a problem in the communication link on their end. On a business sense, maybe you should look into that. But anyways, I had to throw that out there. So I apologize that I had to do that. Could I just ask one more question?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So the specific plan on your agenda, it does state the plan will describe in detail the development of standards and guidelines for the area. You say will, meaning that it hasn't completed yet. How much more input are we going to have on that specific plan, if we're allowed to have any?
The draft specific plan is completed in the draft form.
Okay.
So it goes to Planning Commission still hopefully next week. And then to City Council ultimately approves it. So anything could be changed up until that point.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth, you're in the room, so if you could unmute your microphone so we could hear you, please.
Okay, can you hear me now?
You can, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to know, when you guys say that you went above and beyond this 800-foot radius, I live 2 houses down from this proposed project. Both me and my husband are first responders. And during this whole COVID thing is when you guys started with this project. Now, we're not home. He gets called out 3 weeks at a time. I work 16 to 20-hour shifts in a hospital, and he's a firefighter. I don't feel that Matt Waken and his company went above and beyond to reach us. We are on social media. I can't imagine what more it would have cost him to have people come and knock on our door, because there are frontline workers in this area. And he's saying that he wants frontline workers to purchase these homes, and teachers. We're busy people. We're out working, saving lives. And I don't feel that he went above and beyond to reach us. And I'm a new resident here. I've been here about 2 years. And if I would have known this was going on, I wouldn't have bought here. This monstrosity that's going to be next door to me after I have pumped money to fix my house and keep it up to par with the neighborhood, it's aggravating. And it's aggravating to see him sit there like, hey, I've done my job, but I'm going to pick up my check and leave you with this and walk away. That's not fair. That is not fair. We are exhausted working days in, days out. He did not consider that we have some first responders here and could have went further to try to speak to the people that live in this community, because he doesn't live here. He's going to do this. He's going to leave us with this trash. It's going to be very difficult to stay here in Laverne. I was so excited to move here, and I don't feel that way anymore. I don't. I feel he could have went a little further to help us all out. I'm exhausted working. My husband's exhausted working. And let me tell you, none of the first responders, firefighters, and nurses and techs that I know would buy that. There's no yard. There's no yard. And I don't want to see people barbecuing in the front on Amherst. It's, you know, he didn't go above and beyond. And I think a lot of the neighbors here feel the same way.
Ms.
I
Arenas, I would
think
like,
we could have gone further, Mr. Waken.
Ms. Arenas, I'd like to just clarify, it's the city's responsibility to do the noticing, not the applicants. So the city is the one that does the noticing.
Okay. Noted.
Any other questions?
Not right now.
Okay. Hi, MD, you are on. If you would unmute your mic so we can hear you, please.
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. My wife and I, we bought our property a little further up on Williams last year, January, we moved here. And we have been living in City of Laverne for the last 9 years. We know City of Laverne very well. We particularly love this neighborhood and was waiting to buy something here for a very long time. One of our biggest reason was the quiet and peaceful atmosphere and environment that this particular community provides. When we bought, there was many properties available on Baseline and other places, but we intentionally didn't go for those properties because of the traffic, because of the safety concerns. We have 5 kids in our home, and this community, this neighborhood has been excellent for us. And we invested heavily into buying a large property here. And we spent over $30,000-$40,000 already beautifying our home outside, just to match with the neighbors. Large trees and quiet neighborhood. Every single day we see elderly and kids, people who walk with strollers and scooters, and kids are biking. I think this development having that much density is going to jeopardize really the entire setup of this whole neighborhood. I understand somebody mentioned that you looked at the medium density towards the south and the east, realize that east is Claremont from here. You shouldn't consider east. What about north and west? So if you consider north, west, and south, the only property that has medium density is south. And you have made an argument that, oh, well, you know what? We have the medium density in south. That's one thing that you should keep in mind. The other thing is that even in the medium density, there's a big range, right? You know, to help the project blend in with the surrounding community, you could have stayed on the lower side of the density range. And you're really going with the developer having that mentality in mind that I want to make the highest profit. That's something I think I feel just like everybody else is saying, that there wasn't enough reach out that was done, obviously. But at the same time, when I see that the city's mentality is just to make money here, you know, I don't feel that sense of belonging. And this is going to throw me off. Like I said, we not only bought the property here last year, but we invested heavily in here. And the atmosphere of any community is a big concern to everybody. And again, I know this is probably not a question, but hopefully the city will take care of this. I know the project deal has not been finalized, the developer has been selected, but if you really must go with this project, go with the lower density, at least to help blend in with the surrounding community. Don't look at Claremont, look at Laverne, look at the north side. Right. Thank you.
Mr. Sheed, just again, do you have a question? You know, we're here to try to answer questions. Again, none of us are making the final decision on this, so we're here to try to answer questions. I understand that everybody has opinions about the project. So do you have a specific question for us?
Yes. Thank you for reminding me that. Yeah, I probably made my comment very long, so I'm sorry about that. My specific question is, as part of the community impact assessment, what specific items were done and how did you assess the community impact?
To assess the community impact, we look at the surrounding zoning and the surrounding houses and homes to see if it would be an impact. We also conducted the environmental consultant did the EIR, and Christine will be talking about that in more detail towards the end. There were all of the impacts were talked about and discussed, and they're all within that document. And you did mention schools. The school district was notified. There were no comments or concerns from them specifically.
So maybe if the consultant can expand a little bit on that when they talk about the CEQA assessment of the community impact, appreciate that. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Denise, you're back with us. Please unmute.
Hi. Okay, so I just have another question. You had made mention that the 20-foot parking driveway, rather, that the car could hang out into the sidewalk because it wasn't public sidewalk. I'm not quite sure what that means, why it's not a public sidewalk. I think I recall hearing that the park that is going to be built in this project is a public park. So how are the sidewalks not public if the park is public?
So the sidewalks, the street, the park, they are all maintained by the HOA. They are privately owned and maintained and by the HOA. As opposed to, say, Amherst Street is a city street. The sidewalks are maintained by the city. It is city property. The park, however, would be open to the public, but it is not owned by the city. It's not maintained by the city. The HOA would maintain it and maintain ownership of it.
Okay, so that means that street sweeping doesn't happen in there. The HOA has to handle the street sweeping.
Correct.
Okay, and this is not going to be a gated community?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
I tried to add Danita. Hi, Danita, you're back on the room. Go ahead when you're ready. Danita, are you there? Hi, Danita, can you hear me? You're not muted. All right, I'm going to move you back and then see if we can bring you back in after the next speaker. Hold on one second. I think Danita's is frozen. She's not moving out, but we're going to bring in Andreas again. Hi, Andreas, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm going to just circle back to the communication in the process, and this regard the process. And this is more specifically to Ms. Bocock and Eric. I can't pronounce, I didn't get your last name, Eric. Sorry, apologize about that. But earlier you had a speaker speak talking about lack of communication, getting notices and so forth. Right after me, I believe. That's fine. And you corrected the person, told them that this is not, the communication plan is not part of Mr. Waken's program, and that's understandable. But you know, you left it at that. I think to be more courteous about it, I think you probably should have just offered up a follow-up to that, saying that you will add her to the list as well, now that she called in like you did with me. Overall, in the big picture, that's what I'm talking about. Residents do not like being left in the dark, especially if it impacts them directly, which is us in our neighborhood. And this right here was a prime example of that lack of communication. A little bit more courtesy for the young lady that called in would have been more appreciated. I know the residents are very frustrated, but as a resident myself, we expect you guys to be above that and just, you know, be a little bit more concerning. That's all. Thank you.
It is 7 o'clock. We need to move on because we have 3 other portions of this presentation. So I know, Elizabeth, you had a question. Please just hold on to that. We'll try to get you at the end. Write it down if you can, just so we don't miss it. But we do need to move on with our presentation since we're already an hour into this meeting. With that, we'll turn it over to Chris, or to Matt. Sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
Are you going to pull up the PowerPoint? Yeah.
Candace has it now.
Great. Okay. Well, first off, thank you, Candace and Eric, for organizing this. And I want to thank everybody from the community that's participating. I really hope tonight we can answer a lot of your questions and help you understand some of the methodology that went into designing this project and all the work we've done over the last 18 months. So once again, I'm Matt Waken. I'm with MW Investment Group. I'm the project developer. We can move on to page 2. My company's been in Southern California, particularly in the San Gabriel Valley, for almost 30 years now. We focus on urban infill developments, primarily family-oriented, entry-level family-oriented housing developments. We've done projects and built projects successfully all the way from Glendale out to Claremont along the 210 corridor. We can move on to the next one. Pomona, Whittier, San Dimas, again, Glendora, Monrovia, Duarte, Arcadia. So we really focus on this area, and we really feel we have a good understanding of the market and what the needs and the trends are. So we can move to the next slide. So this is obviously the project plan. I know pretty much everybody in the community has seen this plan. It's 5.6 acres. It's 42 units. It's a 2-story product. The home sizes range from 2,000 square feet to 2,400 square feet. And we are targeting a price point of between $700,000 and $800,000 for the project. Next slide. So this is something that's really important. We've had a lot of talk about it, and there's going to be a lot of questions for me, and I'm happy to answer those. But when we're trying to plan a project and we're considering project, we obviously do significant market studies, and we look into those studies, and we also look into what the local area is defined by. And you have a significant number. I'm going to move on to this slide. When you're looking at the zoning and you're trying to decide how you want to develop a site, with what type of density you want to develop a site, you look at the general area, you look at the housing needs of the area, you look at the RHNA numbers and the housing element numbers from the city's perspective and the state's perspective. And then you also look at the quadrants, the zones, the general plan designations, specific plan overlays, but you really try to look at what is most compatible with the area and what's most compatible with the current market trends. So when you look at this quadrant, and I'm sure many people on this call will disagree, but when you look at this quadrant and you triangulate the area from Amherst south to Foothill and from Williams west to Bradford, when you look at that area, the density that we are proposing is highly, highly compatible. And furthermore, we did a lot of research into where the housing sizes should come in and what the square footage should be, and what was the most appropriate square footage for this area for a price point that could attract young families and people from within the community of Laverne. And the average square foot existing in this area is approximately 2,100 square feet, and we've got an average of 2,200 square feet. So we tried to stay within that, and in fact, over 85% of the homes in that area, PR3D and PR 4.5D, are within 2,000 to 2,500 square feet. So we're very compatible from a square footage standpoint on the units, and we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a really important slide, and this kind of goes to the discussion of the density. We're trying to attract the new home buyers, young families that are underrepresented in this neighborhood. Millennials, 27 to 38 years old, first-time home buyers, they represent the largest segment of home buyers. Laverne has a significantly lower share of those millennials as compared to LA County and the East San Gabriel Valley, and a higher median age at 44. So we're trying to attract more young families that are going to help continue the growth and the success in the schools, in the businesses, and in the community of Laverne. So, that had a lot to do with it. And another really important factor is keeping people that work within the community having the ability to afford homes in the community. So often people are commuting from all over nowadays. People are driving, they live east and they're driving west for work. In the city of Laverne, very important data from the US Census Bureau that's really important to know is that of 9,000 workers, 9,000 employees within the city of Laverne live outside of the city of Laverne. Almost 10,000 that live in the city of Laverne are employed outside the city of Laverne. The number of people, according to the US Census Bureau, that live and work within the city of Laverne is 726. That's a very low number, and one of the lowest in the county. And we think that's important as far as sustainability of the city. So we can move on to the next slide. So this is the design of the project. We tried to keep the project in the spirit of architecture within the community of Laverne. We went with a Spanish concept. We went with a craftsman concept. They're very traditional in their nature, and we think they're going to be a great addition to the community. We can go on to the next slide. Again, we have two different floor plans with two different elevation types. They're very distinctive, very design styles, single-story elements on the front. We're going to have quality landscaping, quality enhancement, quality finishes, side and rear yards, and of course we're adhering to all renewable energy. We have solar panels, EV charging stations in the garages, so they're very sustainable in the way that the units are going to be developed. And we have a quarter-acre park that's in the front. We designed that as a pocket park for the community. It's got a dog run area. It's got a barbecue area. It's an area where kids can go and play. We've got a wood structure, built-in barbecue, picnic table, benches, some bicycle racks, and a doggy station. And this is something that we're developing and we are maintaining privately. So it's not a burden on the city, but it is going to be open to the public and to the neighbors. And we think that's really important. This is another picture of that park. And this is a rendering of the project itself. So, from my perspective, a little bit more on the density as I wrap up my presentation and move on to questions. This is not a high density project. in any way, shape, or form. It's a medium density project. As far as the streets that are designed in this project, these streets are designed to a public standard, which is very, very important. This project lives very much like a conventional single family detached project. And that's very important to note. There's rear yard private space, there's backyards, there's side yards, they're detached, there's 2-story. This project is not inferior in any way in its design or character to the projects and the homes within the neighborhood. And in fact, on projects of this type that go for the medium density, the majority of them, the vast majority of projects that go for the medium density designation have densities of 10 to 14 units per acre and still continue to keep the project detached and 2-story. We're at the lowest end of it at 7.8. So I feel that this project is going to be a great addition to the community. I think that the young families that are going to come here and raise their kids and grow are going to be a wonderful addition to the community. And so, I want to try tonight to answer all the questions that you have to the best of my ability. We have a lot of information for you on the traffic, which I know is a primary concern. But I think that at this point, I've presented the project at Planning Commission. There was the video that was posted on the city's website back in October. And so, I'm happy to answer questions at this point. I can go back through the presentation with anybody that has any questions. And I really appreciate you all being on tonight. And I hope we can answer all your questions.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions. So we're going to start with Ms. Arenas. I'm going to bring her in first. Hi, Ms. Arenas, you are on. Please unmute.
Hi.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, my question is regarding the park that you have set in the front.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you drive around the area, there is no other structures that have barbecues in the front or dog waste stations. I moved here from Los Angeles, and that's a very popular design over there because it's very, very saturated. It's not like that here, sir. I don't want, and I think everyone could agree, I don't want to see people cooking in the front. You specifically said that these particular units have rear yards. They can put their barbecues in the rear of their yard. Everybody in this community has a rear yard and a front yard. There's no need to have barbecue pits in the front. There's no need to have the dog waste stations. When you walk your dog, you already have waste bags. Because I can tell you, I own a townhome with an HOA, and these CCNRs and all of these rules and regulations, they're going to fall to the wayside. You're going to build it, and they're not going to keep up with this. They will not keep up with it. Their reserves will run low on money, and then no one will fill those dog waste stations, and those barbecues will never be used. There's so much traffic going through here. You, sir, would not feel safe barbecuing with your child out there. You would not.
Ms.
You need to
Arenas,
just put them in the backyard.
Ms. Arenas, do you have a question for the developer?
My question is Mr. Waken open to speaking with the residents in regard to that particular park front? There has to be a happy medium, sir, because we live here, and I can tell you, no one barbecues in their front yard, sir. I doubt they do in your area either. My question is, will you budge on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ms. Arenas, there's no question about that. The redesigning of that park and putting in some different amenities is something that I'll absolutely talk with you guys about. And I would have no problem in doing that prior to Planning Commission. So yes, I can absolutely. We programmed that park based on other concepts and prototype parks for what the community usually wants. But I'm not married to that design, and I'd be happy to discuss removing the barbecues from it and the dog waste station. That's not a problem at all. I appreciate your comment.
Hi, Denise, you're on. Please unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, so my question is, in one of the documents that I saw, it says that within the project, there is approximately 40 additional parking spaces. I would like to see on the diagram where those 40 parking spaces are located.
Let me see. I would answer. That's
I'm sorry,
not
you
a,
totally got cut off.
I'm sorry, Denise. Denise, that's not a good depiction of it. The tentative track map would show the street parking, but I assure you that we had to count and provide the city with, on the vesting tentative track map, we had to show the parking because the city was very concerned about parking as well. And they wanted approximately additional one space per unit on the street. So we do have that. That's probably shown better on the vesting tentative track map, but I assure you, we do have 41 street parking spaces.
Yeah, because I mean, it looks like if people are going to be parking on the street, they're probably parking in front of the walkways to walk into someone's home. I mean, just looking at the picture that you're showing up right now.
Sure. We've done the analogy on the parking. There are 41 spaces, and those streets, by the way, are designed to a public standard, as I indicated. So there's street parking on both sides throughout the project.
And Denise, I will add also that, yeah, we were concerned and we wanted, because, there's where the drive approaches are to people's individual driveways, where fire hydrants might be, where there's going to be red curb for no parking. We wanted to see functionally how many spaces, and the city doesn't have a requirement for on-street parking. I want to make that clear. This is not multifamily, thus there's no requirement by the city to have what we call guest parking. But we wanted to see, so we could tell the neighborhood that there'll be 4 on-site spaces, 2 in the garage, 2 in the driveway, and then roughly some number of spaces on the street. And then they've allocated their account of that and provided that detail to us. So, unfortunately, the vesting tentative map has a lot of other lines on it to where it's not really a readable plan, but perhaps we can work on that to get you something.
Okay, and just another question. With the parking, I know somebody had mentioned overnight parking. I know that Laverne does issue permits. I know we have a neighbor that parks on Guava, and I'm assuming that they have maybe a monthly permit. I just don't want to see Amherst look like the front of an apartment building on Foothill where you see cars parked all the way along because there isn't proper parking for guests.
So the city, part of the CCNR is basically the development would basically say, okay, city, you can enforce your parking standards in our neighborhood, and then they're hands off. And so, yes, people could apply for an individual permit, either just an overnight permit if you got a guest, or if it was something that was long-term. The long-term ones, though, require the police department to investigate your property to see why you can't fit vehicles on your site. And it's also specifically only allows that permit to be parked directly in front of the house and the property it's issued to. So that would still work the same as it does here. So example, today, people on the cul-de-sac streets off of Amherst, if they have an overnight parking permit that's long-term, they won't be given one that allows them to park on Amherst. It'll have to be parked directly in front of their house if they apply for that.
Okay, and then just my other question, which I feel like it's kind of, we keep beating the same dead horse, but when he talked about people who live and work in an area and the cost of the house for new young families and such. I know the houses in our neighborhood, the ones that have recently sold, which actually there's been quite a few that just recently sold. I think the the price comparison is about the same. The average price of a home selling in this neighborhood is 850,000, and the house size is comparable as well. Obviously, what's not the same is the square footage of the lot. And I just feel, again, I know I said this a few weeks ago when we all met, but I just feel that the project should have less homes in it and larger lots for families. A 15-foot setback for a backyard just isn't really fair to somebody. I mean, that's like having almost like a condo. And I've heard from people, you know, at the city saying, oh, well, that's what the new families are looking for. That is not what new families are looking for. And we've had numerous new families move into these homes that just sold in our neighborhood. And that is part of the reason they moved here, is because they like the fact that they have large yards. And I mean, even myself here, my house isn't very big, but we have a huge yard. And when we moved here, I walked straight through my house and into the backyard and saw how large it was and said, this is the house for me, because I knew my kids were going to have a great place to play. And I just feel like that's something that needs to be altered a little bit, so that it does fit in with the neighborhood. Because again, comparing it to the mobile home park at the rear of it is not apples for apples. Those run about 250,000, and our houses are about 850,000. So you can't compare lot sizes on that. So anyway, I appreciate it. And that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise.
Hi, Sue, you're on. Please unmute your microphone.
Okay. I just am going back to the compatibility study, and my question is, we have never heard of the northerly residential neighborhood in this study. It has always been the south, the trailer park, which, as Denise just mentioned, is completely not a fair comparison. Just as an aside, my in-laws live there. It is traffic free. There's one car per unit. Most of them don't drive. So that is highlighted. The study keeps highlighting that, and never once have I ever heard the comparison to the entire surrounding north residential area. Why is that? Those are who you're hearing from. Over.
So the staff reports from the city does indicate what the surrounding land uses are in all directions, including to the north. So it is described in the report, but maybe Candace could add more.
No, I don't necessarily have more to add, but they were definitely taken into consideration, and I don't really have much else to add.
I would be curious to see that again, a transparency. You spoke on the compatibility study, and our area is never mentioned. So that's just a question I have, / concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, you're on, so I'm gonna ask you to unmute and go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, this is for the developer. I floated this idea sometime back. There is a big difference between 33 units being built versus 42. So the spread, the delta is 9 units. Now, if you take the 9 units square footage and apply that to the 33 units, it's an increase of roughly 10% square footage. And the developer still has his total square footage or his economic gain. And I'm just wondering, Matt, can this be a consideration, or you're dead set to have 42 units?
So Matt, I appreciate that. I appreciate that comment, and I'll give you my response to it. And I understand your thinking behind it. When we do our market studies, we take into account the affordability index for the property, the price points for the type of buyers that we're looking at. We also look at other projects within the market area, price point sensitivity. There's a number of things that go into it. And, you know, I think that at Planning Commission, when, you know, I was asked about lowering the density and I responded as I did, I wasn't trying to respond in a way that I wasn't willing to talk about it. What I really wanted to say was this project going from 42 to 33, I'll explain to you the reason why it won't work for me. And that's really the best I can do. And I hope you can at least understand my side of it and we can agree to disagree or maybe agree. So this project, a lot of factors go into determining the square footage and the pricing of your homes, as I just described. This project has an extraordinary cost associated with developing it. If you were just to go to the north part of that site along Amherst and look south, you would think that that site looked relatively flat. When in actuality, that site has a 20-foot drop from north property line to south property line. There is a significant amount of cost in this site with grading, with retaining walls, with sewer, with stormwater, with water, with retaining walls, water quality. The cost to develop this site is on a per lot basis is almost double what it is on most standard flat infill lots. That's one item. So when I have to divide that amount, that cost by 33, it proportionally goes up exponentially on a per lot basis. That's one problem. The second problem is if I increase the size of these homes, they become unaffordable to the buyers that I think we need in the community of Laverne, and to the first-time buyers and the people within the community. It becomes out of reach for them from a price point. And it also becomes infeasible because they're too big. And I don't want to build McMansions on these lots. I want to keep the home size at a reasonable price point. So there are factors surrounding increasing the unit size and lowering the density, and it doesn't work as easy as it sounds like it would work. I appreciate the way you're approaching it, and in some cases that could work. In this particular project, that wouldn't work.
Now, if you get rid of that public park, which I can confirm from all the residents that that's pretty useless to even the new families, to be on the practical side, okay? You get rid of that cost, that probably could compensate for what you're saying on the burden of, you know, having 33 homes have more costs added to it from 42. So you compensate that by not building the park. Or you can make a very simple park with none of the amenities of a regular park that we used to know. Because I don't know of anybody around here that would take their grandkids to a park in Laverne when they can have their own backyard, or you know, and most kids today are very different than when we were growing up. The number of people who have broken bones admitted to the ER has dropped. You know why? Because kids are inside the house playing video games. They're now out there playing with their bicycles, okay? And and to add 10% So let's take 2,000 square foot. 10% of that would be 2,200. Let's push it to 2,250. Most families would love to have the extra room. When you talk to all the families here, over the years, they always said, I wish we have a little bit more room. And if you look at the interest rate right now, which is very low, adding 10% to the cost of that, the monthly payment is not that much. So I would say, please consider 33 units, and that will solve a lot of these problems with traffic, parking, and whatever.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Perez, you are on. Please unmute your microphone.
It's actually the same question the last gentleman asked. Mr. Waken did say that he will not budge from the 42 units to the 33. And now I understand why. It's pretty much an economic growth situation. I guess I'm asking this to the city, or who can I ask this? I mean, what can we do to change that? Because that's our biggest concern. I think the communities, we're not having no choice but to be open to these units, but we want to keep it as low as possible. Can we look at other options, other developers? What I understand, he put a timeline. He pretty much put a timeline. Mr. Waken put a timeline on that we need to know as soon as possible. What do we need to do to hear other developers and hear their proposals on a 33 versus 42?
So that question is ultimately the city council's question to answer. This is an application that's been filed legally. The city has a legal obligation to process the application as proposed and make a recommendation. But at this point, we can't tell the developer, you have to change your project. There's nothing in the environmental report that has indicated that this is going to be harmful or detrimental to the environment. There's nothing, and even if it did, we would still be required to process it all the way to the upper level, which is the city council, where it's their decision. So that's all I can, how I can answer it is that the city council has to make that decision if this proposal is appropriate for the site.
So what do we need to do to try to convey that to the city council? How do we go about that?
You're doing it. All the emails, like I said earlier, all the emails, comments, things that we've received are forwarded to them as part of the packet that will eventually go to them when they have that meeting. They get a packet, a week before, and it'll have the report and all the attachments and all the emails and comments we'll talk about in the report, the meeting tonight, and summarize what that was. And again, because you're on this call, and again, everybody on this call is added to the list so that you'll be notified of that meeting hearing date. It'll be held pretty similar to this. The council's asked us to go to allow people into the room one at a time to speak to them directly under the COVID regulations. We don't expect those regulations to change before the city council meeting, so it'll work like this, but you'll have the opportunity to address them. There won't be the back and forth like we have at this meeting. This is a workshop. Those are public meetings, but you'll have a voice and you'll have an ability to express your thoughts on the project to the city council.
So let me ask a question to give Mr. Waken the opportunity and make him accountable as well. Is he willing to go down to 30, from 42 to lower part, the lower density one?
So I believe I just answered that. I mean, let me ask you this question, Mr. Perez. What are your thoughts on my description of my buyer profile? Being a young family and a two-income family with people that live within the community of Laverne and want to stay there, or work very closely and want to stay there. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually like what you're saying about that, but we have a couple of houses that were for $1 million up on Emerald and Baseline.
Right.
They were going for $1 million, and they all sold.
Are you talking
right
about Are you talking about the Emerald project by City Ventures?
all I know is the intersection, Baseline and Emerald.
So if you're speaking about the Emerald by City Ventures, that project was 2,700 to 3,000 square foot homes
Mhm.
on average lot sizes of 6,000 square feet. That was 19 units. It opened for
Okay.
sale in 2017, and it took 2 years to sell 19 units. They sold less than one per month. That project did
Okay.
not, it wasn't economically feasible. And what I'm really trying to avoid is not have $1 million homes. The price point of my home on a per square foot level, Mr. Perez, on a per square foot level, it's going to enhance the values of all the properties on Amherst, because the properties that you're describing and the people that are calling do have the larger lots. So for those types of buyers that they appeal to, they'll pay the higher per square foot because there's more land assigned to it. But my price
Are
point
you
on a
basically Are you basically telling me because of this Amherst project, the houses on Amherst in value will go up? Is that what you're referencing?
I'm so sorry.
For me, or did I break up?
You broke up on
Okay.
me. I'm hoping it's not
Okay.
mine. I'm
Are
sorry.
you suggesting that, okay. Are you suggesting that the Amherst project will increase the value on the homes on Amherst?
I am. I believe that it will, because the projected price points of my homes on a per square foot basis are higher than the average per square foot sales price of the homes that are selling on Amherst currently over the past 12 months. So there'll be an enhancement on the per square foot value of the homes based on the new homes. And it's fairly, it happens when new homes are developed in surrounding communities. If they get higher per square foot exit prices or sales prices on the homes, it enhances the other values of the homes around it.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. I appreciate what you're saying.
Thank you.
But I'll go back and answer that question. Is there any way you can trim some fat off to meet our needs and meet us halfway? Is there any way you can go back down to the 33 or the lower density one?
Yeah, I have to give the same response I gave previously. I just, it doesn't make sense for me. And it's not, and there's been, mention that it's all about the dollar. It's not about the dollar. It's all about what the buyers want today and what the young families can afford. In fact, if I wanted to go after the maximum dollars, I would do what everybody's saying. You would try to drive prices up by adding square footage. I'm specifically keeping the square footage at reasonable points for young family and first-time buyers. That's why I'm doing that. I mean, there's definitely more valuable models and ways to design this project, either at 33, 38, or 42 than I've done, especially on the 42. I'm keeping these homes at a certain size so they meet an affordability index. That's what's important to me, Mr. Perez, really.
Right. Okay. No, I hear that. I hear what you're saying in that aspect. Now, you constantly are saying about first-time buyers. What about the second-time and third-time buyers that want to come into Laverne? Homes are selling pretty quick here.
They are selling quick. And that's a great point. It's a great point. And the second and third-time buyers who are moving up potentially or out of another home, this is a perfect project for them too.
Right.
I'm just referring to young families. They can be first time, second time, or third time young families, but I'm talking about two income earners typically who have the income ability to purchase this type of a home based on LA County standards.
Mr. Perez, we're going to move you back.
And I hear, and again, I appreciate what you're saying. Okay. Thank you. All right. My apologies. Thank you, Mr. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Perez.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jamie, you are on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So, just so I'm clear, the original proposal was for the 33 lots. This is how it was brought to be approved, right?
No.
No.
I never submitted a plan to the city for 33 lots. It's always been 42.
Okay, I just was curious where the 33 number came from.
So that was your question, Jamie? I could try to answer. Yeah.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So yeah, if you could, how are we going from 33 to 42? Like where did that?
So Mr. Wakin is correct. The application filed with the city back in February, Candace, of 2020 included this plan for 42 homes. So over a year now has been the plan before the city. The 33 number is coming about because what the original RFP the city released per the city council's direction asked for projects with different or allowed for different proposals from different companies. It wasn't a binding requirement that number of units that was select for the developer that kind of had indicated what they thought the project would be was going to be the absolute only thing that would be considered. It was a starting off point. And if the city wasn't the property owner in this case, we would never have known that. That's the initial discussions that happened between a seller and a buyer. And so that once the city council selected this firm, that then allowed them to spend more money to do the market analysis to determine exactly what this project would be based on their financial forecast and all the stuff that Matt's already talked about. And then they make the final submittal to the city on what they're actually going to propose for the development. So while the 33 number is coming from the idea of 6 units to the acre, that's where that number is coming from. It was never formally proposed, and it was just the starting off point really for those discussions. The city council is aware and continued the escrow on the project, on the sale of the property, understanding that the developer would be submitting a plan for 42 homes.
Okay, thank you. And then, so this goes back to Mr. Wakin's presentation about him referring to like the census and saying that millennials don't live in this neighborhood. I personally take offense to that because I am a borderline millennial. I actually grew up on Amherst and purchased my home in Laverne. I personally think that census data is incorrect all the time. So I don't know why I guess he could refer to it, but it's not the ultimate say. There are a lot of young people that have actually moved back into this neighborhood that I grew up with. We teach in this neighborhood or in this community. So I don't know where he's getting his data from and if there's other data to support this besides his census data, which I personally know, again, census data is not always accurate.
Well, Jamie, I think that's great. I mean, that's perfect. You're the prototypical buyer for the project. So I think that's great. My only statement was that the millennials share at 23%, of which you're very close to being a member of, I guess, is lower than the average for the county. That was the only statement. But I mean, you're making a really good point. You and your friends are the people that I think are going to be great for this project and a great addition. Obviously you are to the community. So I think it's great. I mean, you're the kind of buyer we would look for and hope would buy into the project. So I appreciate that.
Jamie, if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to move you back to the waiting room. So, all right. We're going to do a couple more here. I know there's still 3 hands and somebody was kicked off that has asked for us to call. So Candace is going to manage that before we move on to the traffic analysis. So I'm going to try to give one more to somebody I don't think that spoke on this item already. I could be wrong, so forgive me, but Andreas is going to come back on the call. And then we'll call Danita and then Elizabeth and Denise. Keep your questions and we will try to get to them after the traffic analysis, even if it's not related directly to that presentation. Thank you. All right, Andreas, you're back on.
All right. Hey, thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Wakin, you did a lot of good reporting there initially. I like looking at the numbers. Unfortunately, I don't have the book in front of me, so I can't refer to it a lot right now. But I understand where you're coming from. And so a quick statement and then a question, okay? Quick statement is I understand where you're coming from, and I know you got to hit that price point. You're trying to hit it right where you need to hit it to go over the break-even point. So you could get, everybody could be satisfied. However, for me as a person, I walk down the street, I have coworkers I talk to who are of a certain age, and I present this case to them, and they want more yardage. They want more of a front yard. They have bigger vehicles that they like to put in there. If they don't, they want the opportunity to do it. I truly believe you could probably make it with 33 homes. Now, you don't have to, I'm not going to present the question to you because it's been asked for you several times already, whether you're going to drop it down to 33, and that's for another discussion. But let me ask you, not to bring it down to 33, but does it have to be 42? Does that number have to be 42?
I mean, at this stage of the game, I have to respond and say yes. It really does. I mean, I've worked over 18 months with the city on this project, and I just don't see going back to the drawing board for, something less. So I'm really committed to this. I'm really committed to this number. I really am.
Okay. Well,
and I say that with all due respect, Andres, and I say that with all due respect, and I really appreciate your comments. I really do. And thank you for coming on the call. Thank you for being very respectful. I just don't have an alternative with it. I've come this far. There's too much cost associated with developing the site. I've had to secure easements. I've spent a lot of time, and we produced that video for the community back in October, and here we are today. But I really have to stay with it.
Okay. Well, I just want to.
Sorry, I was talking and I was muted, but I told Andrea, sorry, I was going to move him back so we could just move forward. There'll still be another opportunity to ask more questions, Andreas, no disrespect. Candace, can you please make the phone call for the last call for this section before we get to Christine and Brian's presentation, please? And unmute yourself, please, too, Candace.
Down. This is Cynthia.
Hi, Cynthia. It's Candace from the city of Laverne. Are you ready for, you are live, and whenever you're ready, go ahead and have your question.
Thank you. We had a tough time. I'm actually here with Danita, and we got bounced off of Zoom for some reason. So I do have a couple of questions for the developer. First one is, what happens when the HOA dissolves? I'm involved at a lot of cities right now, and we are seeing this happening quite often. And what happens when they vote to actually dissolve it? That's my first question. And then my second question is, and this was brought up in his presentation, is that his focus is on the younger families. So this goes back to the zoning and CEQA. How can we compare young families, probably 4 people living there in 2-story homes? How can we compare that as a medium single-family residence to a mobile home, which is 1 story and 1 to 2 people? The density just is not compatible. And I can follow up on that later, but those are my current 2 questions for him. Oh, and then the last one is the Chamber of Commerce. People in the Chamber of Commerce got an email from the developer with a video. How come nobody ever reached out to the neighborhood like that?
Well, I can answer that question. The city did reach out to the neighborhood with that video. We notified people when the workshop was canceled. We notified everyone in that radius that there was a video. Please visit the website. That was definitely email blasted and sent a letter out. So there's that answer. And then Matt can go ahead and talk about the HOA situation.
I've never dealt with an HOA dissolving themselves. So I'm sorry, I'm at a little bit of a loss to respond to that one. The HOAs have always been prepared, properly funded, and they've stayed intact. There are rules in place if an HOA if it does fall apart, that the city has the ability to step in and take on some enforcement. So that would be my answer to that question. And the second question was relating.
Matt, real quick, I'm not aware of any HOAs in Laverne specifically that have gone away either.
Right.
So.
Right.
Sorry.
And then the second question was relating again to the compatibility.
Yeah, and I think, again, not to keep reiterating this,
right.
all that the city's report is saying is that the mobile home park is a density of roughly 8 units per acre based on the size of the mobile home park and the number of units. It's not saying the type of people that live there will be the same, the age of the people that live there will be the same age as the people. We understand it's a senior mobile home park. It just simply, there's the number of units per acre in that development will be the same number of units or slightly more than what the number of homes on this project would be. So just comparing the density, which is what our zoning is based off of. Nothing else.
But Eric, it's important to note that while the density is set in that entire area at 8 dwelling units per acre, that theoretically that property could be developed at 8 units per acre with 2-story structures. It could be redeveloped to something very similar to this. It is compatible. It is what it, when with zoning, you go for what is the zone compatibility. So it's adjacent to 8 per acre, and those mobile home parks could be relocated, moved one day, and a project just like this could come in its place based on the zoning, right?
No, not quite right. The general plan density is accurate and the same. The zoning for the mobile home park is specifically mobile home. So that site specifically can't be redeveloped without a zone change to a residential zone. While it still would be, it has to be compatible with both zoning and general plan. And the zoning itself would not allow the mobile home park to be developed under current zone. That's the only difference. But yes, your point being that they're single story mobile homes, which take up, so they have in theory less yards than what your project will have, but they're also senior parks, so that makes sense, right? So again, I'm not trying to claim that this is a mobile home park or the mobile home park is single family. We're just saying that the density, the exact number of units per acre is compatible with what this proposal is. That's all. I guess we lost them on that one too. So we're going to move on to the next presentation by Christine and Brian. You guys are still there, and Christine, you're going to run your PowerPoint, correct?
Correct. Thank you. Okay, let me share my screen. And load this up. Okay, that didn't work. Sure, there we go. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, looks good.
Great. Thank you very much. As previously mentioned during the beginning of the workshop, I'm Christine Donahue with Rincon Consultants. We were commissioned by the city to conduct the CEQA evaluation for the project, related technical studies as needed. Also presenting with me tonight is our traffic consultant, Gandini, and in particular, Brian Crawford. He will be presenting some of the traffic information. I'm going to give a brief overview of the processes. These are the topics that we're going to cover. I'm going to try and go through this quickly so we can devote the majority of the time to the transportation discussion, and then also, of course, provide an opportunity for questions. So we're going to talk about project milestones, changes in CEQA that relate to transportation. what in the world is VMT? Why are we looking at that? Giving a little bit of foundation for cumulative impact analysis, and then getting into the nuts and bolts on transportation. So this is our CEQA process. In particular, this is the process for an environmental impact report. When we first initiated this project, we did not expect it would rise to the need for an EIR. And the only reason it really does is because of vehicle miles traveled, VMT analysis. If we were looking at this project pre the changes that took place effective July of 2020, the environmental analysis would support adoption of a mitigated negative declaration for this project. But with the change in law, that changed things. So we started out preparing an initial study and distributing and doing some initial technical reports. And then that has driven us into the EIR process. A couple of things to highlight about this, most notably, there's multiple opportunities for public input in the process. We're at the beginning in terms of what we should be studying. We consult with the public, we consult with agencies and get guidance on what needs to be studied. Maybe there's things we weren't aware of. The environmental documentation is completed and then released for a 45-day public review. And we've received comments from many folks on this document. And the city continues to receive comments on the project. Right now, we are in the solicit input at project hearing stage. We're essentially, we're getting input at Planning Commission and this workshop today, and then we will also go to City Council for input. Somebody asked about the topics that we study. This is them. There's 20 some topics that we now evaluate under CEQA. Everything from agriculture and forestry to mineral resources. All of these topics are addressed in the initial study that was prepared for the project. And then we can use the initial study to screen the project down to those topics where there's the potential for a significant impact. And that is what the EIR itself focuses on. And really that's transportation. And then also because we were still in the consultation process with tribes, we also included tribal cultural resources in the EIR, not really because we have significant adverse impacts there, but more of a timing consideration. So the project environmental review began in March 2020, which was a bit of a double-edged sword for the project because the other thing that began in March 2020 was the pandemic. And that we understood would have an effect on our transportation analysis. The initial thought was to delay the transportation analysis until things opened back up. That's really before I think we understood the full scope and scale of the pandemic and not understanding that we would still be dealing with this situation a year later. So when it became apparent as we were moving towards fall that the project was not, that things were not going to go back to normal, that schools were not going to reopen in fall, the city and the transportation engineer and myself, we worked together to come up with a plan for how to evaluate the transportation impacts of the project and move forward. And this is the same discussion that was happening with throughout California, throughout, on projects all across the state, and continues to be discussed. And for the most part, we've got it worked out. There's a pretty standard process that everybody's using.
Hey, Christine, sorry to interrupt. It is showing up with your preview of the next slide on our screen. Can you make your slide the full screen version? So it's more.
It's supposed to be. Let's see. I see.
Maybe the magnifying glass, maybe? I'm not sure what you're using, but I don't know this program.
This is just PowerPoint, but it's doing something.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Sorry about that.
That'll probably work, yeah.
Yeah, it looks fine on, I have two screens. I think that's the issue. And if I'm gonna try, I'm gonna close the screen. I don't know if that helped or not. Can you guys hear, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And this slide at least is readable, I think, at least on my screen. So
okay,
they're pretty small, but hopefully this works for everybody else. Apologies, everybody.
And let me see if I can speed this up a little bit. So in any case, in October 2020, we were full speed ahead on completion of the environmental analysis. So that included the vehicle miles traveled analysis. We prepared a notice of preparation of environmental impact report, completed the initial study, a project video and project information was published on the city's website and made available for everybody. The draft EIR was completed in early December, published in mid-December, and available for public review through February 1st. And so that kind of brings us to where we are today. So VMT, just briefly, as I mentioned, effective July 1st, capacity analysis is no longer a consideration under CEQA. The state is now favoring what's called vehicle miles traveled. And the whole driver for this is because transportation impacts are the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. California's done a really good job of targeting industry, electricity, even how we build residences and how we operate residences. We now have very stringent development requirements that make homes very energy efficient. Our grid system continues to become more and more renewables. So what's left is transportation. And so what the state is essentially doing is driving housing towards, basically making policy that drives housing towards transit and encouraging the development of infill and encouraging the development of housing closer to your major transit infrastructure. So that is the whole reason for this, as opposed to capacity, where if you continue to build housing, for instance, in more suburban areas, you are encouraging sprawl, you're encouraging greater distance be traveled. And so that's what's driving that. So capacity is no longer the law of the land under CEQA. We still look at it, agencies can still look at it for evaluating their infrastructure, determining whether improvements are needed, but it is no longer a consideration under CEQA. Okay, and then VMTs are substantially driven by project location. So taking a look at this project, we could build the exact same project, not anywhere in Laverne, because Laverne does not have any transit priority areas. We'd have a significant impact no matter where this project was placed, but you could place it in a neighboring jurisdiction that was close to a transit priority area, and it would have a less than significant impact under CEQA. So Location is a huge driver. It's not the only driver, but is a huge driver for whether or not you're going to have a significant impact on the VMT. It's more difficult for projects to screen out from a VMT analysis that are not near mass transit. If you're near mass transit, it's a lot easier to not even have to do a detailed analysis. Just briefly on cumulative impacts, those include past, well, let's just read this real quick. A cumulative impact is one that results from the combined effects of past, present, and reasonably foreseeable future projects or activities. So your past and present projects includes what you see. It's basically your existing conditions. What is your built environment right now? That represents your past and your present conditions. Reasonably foreseeable projects, we look at those by looking at future projects that have been approved but not yet developed. If we know about those, we can specifically evaluate those in analysis. We can also look at projected growth, things like SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments projections. There's a lot of data that's specific to the San Gabriel Valley that's relevant, that can be looked at, but basically we look at regional growth projections, and that can help us understand what reasonably foreseeable future conditions would be. And then the degree of contribution of a project matters. So key to the evaluation of cumulative impacts, how much of the project is contributing to an adverse cumulative impact. So it's not just a matter of is it contributing, but how much is it contributing? I'm going to turn things over to Brian. He's going to talk a little bit about the approach and methods for evaluating traffic capacity for a project. And then he's going to get into some of the project specific findings.
Thank you, Christine. You explained that very well. So I guess we'll start off with traffic is kind of confusing now, with SB 743, which Christine talked about regarding July 1st, 2020, where the state changed entire guidelines for CEQA. Traffic is now only analyzed via VMT. Level of service analysis is no longer required, no longer acceptable under CEQA. However, most jurisdictions in California still realize that VMT analysis does not take into account at all the effects of a project on the surrounding roadway network, the intersections, and without that sort of analysis, the city just would not know how the roadway network is operating. So most all jurisdictions have still kept a level of service analysis for city purposes. That's what I'm commenting on here because that's the traffic study we did was this LOS analysis.
Hey, Brian, real fast, Brian, sorry to interrupt. Your audio is kind of cutting in and out. Maybe, I don't know if your internet, maybe turn off your video to see if that works better. Try it again. You're still breaking up a little bit. I mean, you can make it out mostly, but you are breaking up.
Let me see if I can maybe change locations. I've had this problem in the past in my computer room. And I tried logging on with my cell phone, but I can only log into one device. Is it sounding a little bit better now?
Keep talking. Try it again.
Yeah, is it sounding a little bit better now?
I think so, yeah. So go for it.
Okay, perfect. And let me know if it starts cutting in and out again. I'll try to move locations as well. So I'll get back kind of more towards the beginning. Like Christine said, SB 743 when it went into effect July 1st, 2020. At that point, VMT became the only metric under CEQA for analyzing traffic. Level of service was no longer acceptable. But most jurisdictions realizing that level of service is how you analyze a roadway network in their jurisdictions, obviously we want to keep that. So Vern, as well as just about everybody else, kept that standard for product developments. This slide here shows the kind of existing and future conditions for capacity analysis, the kind of the approach and the methodology. On the right-hand side, you'll see the levels of service, and you go from A to F, just like you're in school. And for the city of Laverne, anything that's LOSD or better, so A, B, C, and D, is an acceptable level of service. E and F are unacceptable levels of service. We'll go on into later slides, more of the the scoping we did with the city and how we prepared the scoping memo. So if we can move to the next slide. Thank you. This again talks about, once we have the project, we have the information and distribution, look at what we're going to analyze, and study intersections, cumulative impacts, so on and so forth. So we can move to the next slide. And this here is the City of Laverne standards when it comes to what used to be called significant impacts. Now we have to call them like operational traffic impacts. So we can't use that language anymore due to CEQA. But what this is showing is that for City of Laverne, when you have level of service C, which corresponds to the 0.71 to 0.80 capacity ratio for an intersection, if your project increases that point capacity by 0.04 or more, then it's considered an operational traffic impact. And therefore, you mitigate to reduce it to a level that's less than significant, less than operational. Same for level service D, level service EF. You can see as it goes, as the level service degrades from C to F, that the incremental increase lowers as well. So less traffic would actually have a greater impact at those lower thresholds to create an operational impact that the problem have to mitigate.
Brian, you're breaking up pretty bad now. I mean, it's been hit and miss, but
is it possible that I can call in on a mobile phone?
So you could try. Don't jump out of this yet if you can, just in case, and then you can try clicking your link as a panelist. I simply don't know if it'll work.
Yeah, I tried it earlier and it wasn't working.
Okay, yeah, I think it's restricted to be able to come back in on a different device on the same link. So I guess maybe it seems like when you first start, it's okay, and then the more you talk, so I don't know, maybe try to slow down a little bit and see if that helps.
Okay, I'll just try to slow my speed here. Hopefully it'll work better. Sorry about that. I don't know why my laptop is having audio issues.
That's okay. It never fails. Don't worry. We're doing the best we can. And I'll just share with the rest of the group. We will make these slides available to you. We'll either update them on the website or email. We'll get them to you. So you'll be able to go through these at full screen at your own speed. So you'll have access to this information after tonight's meeting. So hopefully that'll help too.
Thank you very much. So I guess back to this slide, this is the level of service standards for the city to determine if a project contributes an operational impact at an intersection or not. You can see it goes from level of service C through F, and the incremental increase goes from 0.04 or more for level of service C down to 0.01 or more for level of service E to F. So as level of service degrades, then the incremental increase also is lower, which means that less traffic would create a potential operational impact at a lower degraded level of service. Move to the next slide. Okay, so this is when we get into the scoping agreement. So what we did is we had a discussion with the City of Laverne staff, including the city engineer, the city's traffic engineer, back in April. We discussed, what we're going to look at for the level of service analysis, so on and so forth. We put together a scoping agreement, sent that over to the city. That's when the project got delayed for 4 months. We came back in August. We submitted a scope. The city had specific comments. We revised the scope based on those comments, resubmitted, and the city approved the scoping agreement, and we moved on to conduct the traffic impact analysis. So in consultation with the city, we devised these 7 intersections for analysis. It's important to note that typically level of service analysis is only required when a project contributes 50 or more peak hour trips to a study or intersection. In this case, the product itself does not contribute 50 or more peak hour trips in general. Therefore, typically you would either be exempt from a level of service analysis, or you'd only do the adjacent intersections, which would be Bradford, Amherst, Williams at Amherst. However, the city knew that this was a community concern for this area and wanted to do as much as possible to analyze as many potential impacts as possible. Therefore, that's why we analyzed these 7 intersections. Next slide. This figure here shows the trip distribution. So as you can see here from the project site, we have 75% that headed west on Amherst, 7% remain to Fruit. We have 25% head south to Williams, We submitted the trip distribution to the city, based on existing count data we had, the area, the demographics, for residential community. You're looking at, where are the local schools, where are the local commercial, where's offices, where's the freeways, so on and so forth. And the city made some adjustments to that, and this is what we entered and approved right here. It's also kind of important to note here on this slide that for Williams Avenue, just in general, we're doing trip distribution. We're trying to do an overall gravity model. We're looking at the shortest path from A to B. So the shortest path, down to Foothill Boulevard, if you're heading eastbound, will be Williams Avenue. While there are other cut-through opportunities and whatnot, usually those cut-through opportunities are done because there's a problem traffic-wise at an intersection people are trying to avoid. But we don't want to account for that, showing project trips going away from the intersection that has a problem. We want to show, the full traffic going at the route they should be going through that intersection. That way we're evaluating that intersection and on a worst case basis, putting all the traffic there. That way, if we need to do any sort of mitigation, it's focused there instead of trying to divert, off where that problem occurs. We can move to the next slide. This is a product trip generation. This is from the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, 10th edition, 2017. They update the trip generation manual every few years, so around its 10th edition, and they update it with new data. So they'll, change the rates. They'll remove land uses like a blockbuster still no longer in existence, or they'll add land uses that, kind of like fulfillment centers for Amazon facilities that, weren't around a decade ago, now they are. We have two different rates here, the nursery and the single family. The nursery is for the existing land use. The single family is obviously for this project. And this just shows what the AM and PM peak hour rates are, as well as the percentage in and out, as well as the daily rate. One thing to note on the daily rate is that, and we'll see it later in the product trip generation, is that when we're talking about trips, as soon as a car leaves the development, that's one trip. As soon as they come back into the development, that's a second trip. So when we're talking about daily rates, the number of vehicles is actually divided by 2. Next slide. This, again, just shows the trip generation for the project in its entirety. So you can see here, you have the 43 single family units, I guess it's 42 now, that is, showing the rate, the inbound, outbound, and total. So you have 32 trips during the AM peak hour, 43 during the PM peak hour, 406 total. Then you have the nursery, and the nursery is showing 2 trips during the AM peak hour, 1 during the PM peak hour, and 107 daily. And it's negative there because it's the existing land use. So we're subtracting that off from the proposed project to get the net increase. So you can see the net increase is 30 for the AM, 41 for the PM, and 299 for the daily. Next slide, please. These are the existing conditions. So before we get into the existing conditions and what this means, let's go into how we got the existing traffic counts, because I know that that's an issue. So as Christine alluded to, COVID has really hit us hard in the fact that we can't really take existing traffic counts anymore and just apply that data, because everybody knows traffic is not where it used to be because of the lockdown. So we don't know when it's going to come back at this point either. So what we've done in every jurisdiction in California is had to get historical data that was pre-COVID that we could then compare to their existing traffic counts to devise growth rates. Sometimes that ends up being pretty easy, and we're analyzing intersections that were analyzed a year prior. So we can just take the 2019 traffic count, slap an ambient growth rate, that's the city ambient growth rate for 2020, and there's our counts. A lot of times it's not so easy in that we just don't have the historical data. So we talked to the city. The city was able to provide a 2011 traffic study. We only used the traffic counts for the intersections we're analyzing from that traffic study, just the raw data. We took the 2011 traffic counts. We increased it by the growth rate. The growth rate is from the city's, the Los Angeles County Congestion Management Program, which devises growth rates for all different areas of the county. We compounded that over 9 years to come up with what would be 2020 rates. And then we got existing traffic counts now for 4 intersections, or we got them for all 7 intersections. We looked at the 4 intersections that are the same as the 2011 traffic counts. We then compared the two numbers and realized that we needed to increase the existing traffic counts by 80% during the AM peak hour and 42% in the PM peak hour, just to get back to the level that was expected in for 2020, assuming that the COVID pandemic had never happened. A couple notes on that too is one, we apply the growth rates to every turning movement. A standard 4-legged intersection has 12 turning movements because you have 4 legs. You can go left through or right. A lot of intersections, typically the right and left-hand turns, if they're not major intersections like major arterial, are going to have that growth rate. So it's conservative because we're adding more traffic than we feel would actually occur because we're applying growth rates to every intersection. Is my audio still okay?
About the same.
Yeah, so if you could just try to summarize, we did have a request to just kind of go to questions and answers. So, but I think what you're saying is important. So trying to do the best we can here, everybody, and Brian will be there at the end and we'll try to answer your questions. Apologize for the audio problems. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't know how to fix it on my end. I'd have to move my phone. So this is a slide that shows the future conditions with and without project. As you can see, Fruit and Amherst and Williams at Foothill are both level of service F. They're F without project, they're F with project. There were also F for existing conditions. So that didn't change. We can move to the next. And this is the future conditions 2040. Same situation for both of them. And we can move.
Brian, are you still talking? You cut out completely.
No, Christina, I was just trying to say that it's still level of service F for both intersections during 2040 conditions. We can move on to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, so basically this just shows that we had minimal impacts to the study area intersections based on the project because the project generated minimal trips. It did not hit the level of service operational impact criteria for those intersections. Therefore, there was no operational impacts, so we can move on.
Okay, so just to reiterate, the study included a conservative evaluation of the project impacts. We looked at worst case scenarios for all of the relevant distribution. When you look at the project, it doesn't affect any of the traffic conditions. It just doesn't have a big enough impact to be considered the project contributing to an adverse impact. It's very minor. You could add additional units to the project. You're still going to have less than, well, I'm using CEQA terminology here, but not a substantial adverse effect. We never even got to the mitigation aspect because you have to have an adverse impact to be mitigated to look at that. So there's just no improvements that the project warrants. It's not to say that you don't have poor traffic conditions out there. Obviously you do. Based on these charts, you have intersections that have LLSF. But that doesn't mean that the project is going to create a significant adverse impact at those intersections. So I think that we'll go ahead and move on to questions.
Can you exit your screen share? Thank you. Okay, everyone. Thank you for your patience again. What I will also share is that we will fix these technical problems, and we'll be doing the same presentation again before the Planning Commission in front of them next Wednesday. So we'll fix the audio so you have a better chance to hear their presentation and see the full screen at that meeting. So, and again, we'll we'll provide these PowerPoints to you immediately tomorrow. And so you'll have a chance to look at them before the Planning Commission meeting as well. So with that, we do have some questions. I'm going to start with bringing Mr. Rowe into the meeting. Mr. Rowe, you are on the meeting and please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question regarding the traffic study or the traffic intersections that are actually in scope within the EIR. I'm assuming that neither of the people here actually live in the neighborhood, and I'd be interested to see whether they've even visited the local neighborhood to understand the road system here, because clearly they don't from the EIR. If you come up here and you actually look at the flow of the traffic, Amherst will be significantly impacted, but you've excluded Bowdoin Street completely from the intersections that were studied. If you look at the flow of traffic from the development and Amherst to the 210 freeway, the quickest route is to go north on Bradford and then west on Bowdoin Street, because we have no stop signs or anything like that. And then there's the intersection to turn right to the 210. You're assuming that all traffic is going to flow from the development all the way down Amherst and then turn right on Fruit Street. And that's just not how traffic flows up here. If you actually come up here and sit, you'll see that the traffic will go from the 210, it will travel along east, along Bowdoin Street, it will travel south along Bradford, and then it will travel east to the development, and it will do the reverse journey. So you're incorrect to exclude Bowdoin Street from the impact of the traffic. You're wrong in your assumptions about the traffic flow. So my question is, do you just not understand the local neighborhood, i.e. You're negligent in your report by excluding Bowdoin Street, or was it an intentional thing to leave Bowdoin Street out of your EIR? That's my question to you.
Yeah, so I'd like to take first stab at that, and then Brian is welcome to add on. The assumption that, let's just say for a moment that we sent traffic, we showed a distribution going north center rather than continuing west to Fruit. So if we did that, we would be showing less traffic impacts at Fruit. So in order to do,
Fruit and Amherst, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Because if you're going to the 210, if you come up here and you're going to drive to the 210, you won't drive down through 2 stop signs on Amherst to get to the 210. You'll turn on Bradford and you'll take, like every other car does here, they'll go 60 miles an hour down our street, Bowdoin Street, to get to the 210. That's the flow of traffic here for the 210.
Yeah, so I understand that. So
well, why is it excluded? My question is, why is it excluded them from the EIR if that's the flow of traffic?
So
you want me to try to take this one, Christine? Hopefully my audio is halfway decent.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a straightforward question. Why is Bowdoin Street excluded?
It's not a straightforward question, but Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer the question. So like I said earlier, if you were able to hear, I don't know. But when we look at traffic distribution, we're looking at a straight line path, the quickest point from A to B. And that would be to go west on Amherst all the way to Fruit Street, and then turn Fruit Street instead of going circuitously.
Yeah, we can't hear you properly, Brian. And that if you're looking at the quickest path, you're wrong in your assumptions. The quickest path to the 210 is north on Bradford, west on Bowdoin Street. So you're wrong if that's your criteria.
Yeah, that is, well, that is a criteria. We're looking for the quickest path one.
Yeah, well, you need to reevaluate that. So what I'm asking, you should put that within your EIR, because if your criteria is the quickest path,
Mr. Rowe, please let them try to answer your question. And if you keep interrupting them, they're not going to be able to do so. So please let them try to answer that.
So here, Brian, let me finish what I was attempting to explain. If we follow the direction of the traffic that's shown in the traffic study, it gives us a worst case scenario at Amherst and Fruit. Assuming that a portion of the traffic was to go north sooner, we would be underestimating traffic impacts at Amherst and Fruit. We don't see enough traffic going north to warrant evaluation of those intersections. That was based on Brian's professional opinion. That was also based on the professional opinion of the city engineer. Yes, we have been to the project site. No, we do not live there.
Okay, thank you for your answer. My request is that in any future version of this, I think you should study that traffic flow, because there will be significant impact on Bowdoin Street. The other part that was missing, I felt, was there's no real mention of construction traffic to and from the site. The natural path, again, from the 210, assuming the construction traffic flows from the 210 freeway, would be Bowdoin, Bradford to the construction site. So I feel we're going to, unless you're going to instruct the construction traffic, this is to Matt maybe, are you going to instruct the construction traffic to follow the path that's in the EIR, which is south on Fruit and east on Amherst, or you're expecting the construction traffic to use Bowdoin Street?
Yeah, so a traffic construction route is established with the city. So we work, the applicant, the developer, they work with the city to establish the traffic construction route.
So when would that be established, and will we be notified whether the construction will use Bowdoin or Amherst or both?
Part of the final design process, right, Candace?
Yes. And you would be notified.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's my questions.
Hi, Elizabeth, you're back in the room. Please unmute your mic. Hi, Elizabeth, can you unmute your mic, please?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, my initial question was, before we started the traffic study, was in regards to the HOA's CCNRs and rules and regulations. How much of that is going to be made available for the current residents here to see? Because I strongly feel that rules and regulations and those CCNRs will affect people that live in the immediate area, which is me. I'm right next door to your project. And those are difficult to change once they're established. So that's my first question. HOAs, CCNRs, do they come from you, Mr. Waken?
I can answer that for you.
Okay.
So yes, the developer, if the project is approved by the city council, they're approving what's called a tentative track map. After that map is approved, then Matt has to go back and prepare a final map, which has a lot more specific, very fine details and where the lines are drawn, et cetera. Also part of that process will be develop those CCNRs. And then those are reviewed at a city level along with the final map and the final map does go back to the city council for adoption. It's kind of a ministerial process because it's not like a public hearing like these upcoming meetings are, but there is a review process at a city level on the CCNRs. They are public record though. So yes, we can share those with you if the project's approved. The developers don't develop CCNRs at this point because they're not even sure they have an approved project. But once they know that they have that, then they spend more money on getting those final details in place, which are reviewed by the city and the city's attorney and the city engineer for making sure we're happy with what they are. So, but they are public record and we'll be happy to share with them later down the road if that's what occurs with this project.
Okay. I'm very happy that those are going to be made public, but how much of an input, if any, are the immediate residents going to have?
You can review them. You'll be able to comment on them and provide those while they're still draft. it's not, it won't be a public hearing per se, like I said, but it will be on a city council's agenda. You could ask the city council to pull it from the agenda for further discussion and ask them or explain to them what your concerns might be. And then they could, decide that they want to address those and change the CCNRs, or if they feel that they're fine the way they're presented. There is a process that you'll have at that point. But you'll just have to stay plugged in with us too, though, because that's could be a year from now potentially, just depending on when the developer moves forward with doing those final drawings and going for his final map, and when those might be available. So keep plugged in, and we'll make sure Candace will try to make a note to remember to provide that, just as the truck route. Those are things that we normally wouldn't notify the neighborhood about, but there's no reason why we can't. So we'll try to keep track of those as additional steps in our process for notification for you based on this request.
Okay, and also I couldn't really hear Mr. Crawford. It sounded like the Peanuts teacher. I couldn't make out what he was saying, and I'm very sorry because I really want to hear it. But my concern is, since I am next door to this project and people are either going to be exiting west or east, that's 168 cars blowing through Amherst. They're not going to have a choice. They're going to come through the front of my house. Will another study, would you all consider doing another traffic study? Because I strongly feel that if you just sat in front of my house, you would see the cars zipping by here at 4 to 5 cars a minute. So I'm adding 168 of those cars, and I have to reverse into my driveway. It's not even possible most of the time right now because people are getting close to hitting me. I have to reverse in because I have an electric car that needs to be charged in, and I'm not capable of doing that now. So if you're adding 168 cars, because he's set on his 42 units, will another study be done? I invite Mr. Wake and anybody from the city to come and sit on my yard and have some coffee so you can see the amount of traffic that blows through here. It's a big concern for me.
Ms. Arenas, yes, I could also answer this question for you.
Yes.
This project will, if it's approved, the EIR is the final study for this project's specific impact on traffic in the neighborhood. However, as Candace mentioned earlier in her presentation, the city council recently gave us direction, staff, employees, to go back to the city's active transportation committee, which is a separate group made up of staff and residents and people that are involved in the citywide traffic things, such as bike lanes and things, to look at your specific neighborhood, Amherst, Baldwin, Bradford, to see about if there's additional traffic calming measures or other things that might occur. So they might recommend that further study be done at a city level for the general neighborhood based on the outputs of that active transportation committee. But Mr. Waken and his application won't be required to do a new study if it is approved by the council.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Hi, Matt, you're back on. Please unmute.
Presented, the second to the last slide, it shows you the Amherst Street.
Go ahead.
Can you put it on the screen?
It might be tough. We're having problems. Christine, is that?
I want the audience to see it because I know that street quite well, but for people that are not familiar with it, they will have no idea what I'm talking about.
I'm waiting to see if Christine can do it. So maybe you can just describe what your comment was, and we'll see if we can pull it up.
Your traffic studies is basically based on today's situation, right? But when you have guest parking on Amherst during the day, and they're parked on the side of the street, can you visualize how to maneuver through Amherst during the day if you have allowed parked cars on the streets? There you go. You see that? The lanes are not that wide, and the bike lanes, or whatever you call that lane on to the side of the white line. That's where people will be parking, right? Guest parking during the day. Very likelihood, right?
It's not expected that there will be much guest parking on Amherst because the parking is available in the site. So unless we're talking about, major holidays or events where a lot of people have parties, maybe when there's a brief influx of cars, there's only one house that has a side facing Amherst to where people are going to park closest to the home where they're going. So it's not expected that there's going to be really many times a year at all that anybody would be parking along Amherst to go to, 5 houses 5 doors in from Amherst when on-street parking is allowed. If on-street parking wasn't allowed, I completely agree with you. But because we have 40.
Let me share a story, okay? I talked to this professor, architect at Cal Poly University that does all the parking lot design and all that. And I once asked him, how do you know where to put the path for people to walk on when they get out of the car in the parking lot to go to the mall or whatever? He says, you know what, Matt, you can never predict the behavior of people. So I don't put any pavement or nothing. And I just watch where they walk. And when they start making trails, that's where I put the path, because now I can predict their behavior. Now, we are second guessing here that, oh, nobody's going to park there. There's only one side and one house on one side. What if we are wrong? All right. So my question is, in your traffic design and studies, what part of it will affect Mr. Waken's decision to reduce the number of units being built? Because by reducing the units, essentially you're reducing the number of cars. That's the question. So what part of your study will somewhat influence his decision? And what if we are wrong and it's pretty bad? The traffic is bad. What would you do? Put a traffic light there?
So this, I'll answer. So again, we're talking parking and traffic. So I'm going to try to summarize. The traffic analysis doesn't look at parking. It's about the vehicle movements, right? So yes, there are assumptions that have to be made for every project that's ever proposed on how those movements happen. And ultimately, if the projects are built, the city is responsible for controlling that traffic. And like I said on the last caller, we are prepared to do a fuller, broader look at how traffic operates in this neighborhood today. And that would mean that we could do the similar study 5 years from now when the project's open and operating. And if those numbers and those studies show that these projections were way off and that now there's too many cars and we go from a level of service down to something lower, then the city would be responsible for making adjustments to the neighborhood and how traffic operates. And we have city traffic engineers and our public works department. They look at that in all neighborhoods across the city, whether there's a project being proposed or not. We constantly are doing analysis of traffic in neighborhoods. So the city's going to be here forever. The developer will not be. The homeowners will be here. And we are committed to looking at those as time goes on, whether there's a project or not. But that's my best answer for your question.
Okay, our last comment is, somebody mentioned that we don't like to see parking pretty close to what you see on Foothill, in front of all the apartments. Now, what can Mr. Wake can guarantee us as far as guest parking so that 9 out of 10 cars that come to visit will really be inside the project and out on the streets? You cannot predict that. I cannot predict human behavior. So how will you solve that as a city engineer?
Well, I'm not a city engineer. I'm the planning director.
I know, but you're closer to that than I am. I'm asking you a question.
Sure.
Just walk down the street and
Yes.
look at it.
Mr. Uboko.
Yeah.
Yes, the city has other measures to restrict on-street parking in neighborhoods. We do it a lot of different neighborhoods, mostly around the university and downtown, where we have preferred residential parking, where only certain people with permits are allowed to park on the street in that block because of parking concerns that have been raised based on either university parking or whatever. So there's opportunities here. For example, parking on the north side of the street in front of the homes that are on Amherst today. If there was a parking problem and people lived in these houses were parking over there, or if across from your house existing today, if your neighbor was always parking in front of your house, you'd be upset and you'd be calling the city. And we have different methods and techniques that we can use to address that, whether this is a new development or an existing neighborhood without new housing. So we have other alternatives with including parking permit only on streets, which is even during the day. I'm not talking about overnight. During the day, there's areas where you have to have a permit to park in the street. People don't like it all the time, but there are different ways that we can address that in the future.
And just a side note for Mr. Awaken, if you omit having the public park there and have additional guest parking, that saves you money and that solves our problem too.
Okay, any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Andreas, you're back in. Please unmute.
Okay, I got you now.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna make this real quick. Getting kind of late. Going back to the analysis, this question is specifically to, well, the individual that was talking. Do you expect an increase of traffic even without the project, given all your background on this?
Brian, I think that's for you, yeah.
Yeah, that's for Brian. Sorry, thank you.
Yes, for that question, do we expect an increase in traffic even without the project? The answer is yes. And that would be the scenarios for opening year 2022 and year 2040 without project.
Okay. Next question will be the thresholds. You talked about those. Now, refresh my memory. And are they the allowable thresholds? Are they placed by the city, or is it something that's given by the county or the state?
City.
The city. All right. And the city's willing to go to the top end. I believe it was F, if I recall.
No, level of service D or better.
D or better. Okay. But there is no consideration of what the neighborhood feels. It stops right there when you do your analysis, right? You don't go to the neighborhood and ask, hey, what do you feel? You just go by what the thresholds are given by the city, right?
Correct. We're looking at the quantitative data.
Copy that. Thank you. Next question is, what was the threshold on Amherst and Williams? Is it level C or D is the most you could go?
What intersection was that again?
I'm sorry, Amherst and Williams Avenue. That corner there, the left hand.
Williams and Amherst is currently level of service A.
Okay. And after the project, you expect it to go to?
I'm pulling that up right now.
All right.
Let's see here. Yeah, we have level of service B for the AM peak hour for year 2040, and service A for year 2040 as well for during the PM peak hour. Right, I think of becoming B.
Okay. Now, you did pull up the data from 2011, worked it off of there, did your increases and so forth, right? I hope I'm doing the right comparison here, and I think I am. Well, I'm going to get to the final statement here and close this out. As a resident who lives on that street, since this thing started, I've been counting the cars. Well, the last 5 years I lived there, traffic has increased significantly. And I've been counting the cars coming in during the COVID time. And when you count 44 cars in a half an hour on a Sunday afternoon, that's a lot. So I can imagine when this project goes up, whether it's 1 home, 2 homes, 33 homes, it's going to increase even more for that matter. So the traffic between Williams and Bradford is a huge consideration. And I know we pull a lot of data from different places, but as a person that goes to this stuff, because I do analysis for other people and other jobs, and I tell people you really have to go down to the street level, get the street level data, and just walk it and just see for yourself what you're seeing. And like Matt said earlier, it's really hard to predict human behavior. We don't know what's going to happen, So, anyways, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Andres. I just like to add, I just did the quick math. So for Williams at Amherst, during the PM peak hour for existing traffic conditions, we have 76 trips going through that intersection. So it's 176.
All right. It's not matching up to what I'm counting, and I'm out there counting it. So I think I'm going to put a street counter out there or something. I don't know. It's pretty obvious. So Well, thank you for your effort. Appreciate it.
Hi, Edward, you're back on. Please unmute your mic.
Hello?
Hi, go ahead.
Okay, so question, is there going to be speed bumps in the Amherst project?
No.
Have the city considered putting speed bumps along the perimeter, Amherst, Williams, et cetera?
So our public safety departments do not support the speed bumps in the city. And so even in private developments, even on private streets, if they wanted to add them today, one of the gated communities up north just recently did it without talking to us. They're actually being required to remove them for the response time for fire and police vehicles. We do not support speed bumps. There are other traffic slowing measures that can be done. That's why those white stripes are along Amherst actually, is to try to narrow the drive lanes to make people feel like they need to go a little slower. It's just, it's one of the many things that can be done. That's why we're going to go back to the Active Transportation Committee to look at more things that can be done like that. But speed humps or bumps are not a solution that the city will allow for.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so Candace, it looks like that's all the raised hands. So if you can please call, we have, I know 2 callers at least. Please call the one that hasn't spoken yet because they've been very patient and they might have comments on things that are not traffic related. And then we'll call the other one. And I think that's all we have. Or we have 3 callers, correct? That we need to call. 4, thank you. That's why Candace is paying attention to this. So she'll call and she'll be handling the phone messages at this time. So hold on. And Candace, you are muted.
This is Candace from the city of Laverne. I'm calling you wanted to speak with the developer or the city about the Amherst project? You are on the Zoom meeting now. You can start.
Okay. I can start now.
Yep, go ahead.
Hello, hi. I have a little one here, but I'll make this quick. I have a couple questions. Regarding all the studies, have they considered the fact that being that we're in Southern California, real estate is really expensive, that more likely there'll be more than a single family, usually 2 families that will be purchasing homes in that area? Has that been considered?
Do you mean 2 families living in one home?
Right. As a standard, since a lot of people can't afford living in this area or other high prime locations, usually it's like 3 to 4 adults that are occupying a home. So is that being considered in your studies?
In the traffic study you're referring to?
Both traffic and development.
So I can handle traffic. When it comes to traffic studies, the trip generation is based on the IT rates for single family residents. The single family rate for IT doesn't factor into the number of families living in a single unit or number of bedrooms. It's just a generic rate for single family residents. So information like that, as far as number of families that live in the house, is not factored into the actual rate. It's just based on the actual studies done in the field for actual single family homes.
Could you understand that? Or could you hear him? Danita? Liliana. Sorry.
There's just a delay. I couldn't hear what they were saying.
Okay, so basically, single family homes, regardless of how many adults or children or people living in the house, there's just one number that they are given to count towards how many cars or how many trips they generate.
And that's 2 cars, right? Assuming it's 2 parents.
Brian, what's the
No, they do traffic counts for single family resident developments, take the the number of cars that come in and out of those developments and divide it out by the number of dwelling units total. And then is the trip generation. So you could have homes where you have 10 people living there. You could have homes where you have one person living there.
So a single family home is just one number. It doesn't take into account the number of people that could possibly be living there.
Now, because just looking at the purchases around the area, I see an average 3 to 4 cars in the driveway, which just kind of concludes that there are 3 to 4 adults living in a household. So it no longer is a single family, it's 2 families essentially. So I'm assuming that wasn't considered in your studies, both development and traffic.
No, it is single family housing, so that's how it was analyzed.
Okay. The other question is the HOA, when they do receive purchases for sale contracts for people who are interested in purchasing a home there in the development, would they be considering and only approving homes that are with the interest of a single family, meaning 2 adults or 1 to 2 adults, and of course the respective children?
I'm going to assume that they will not be taking that into consideration. I don't, but Matt can probably touch on that. Could you hear her question?
I did. These are absolutely contemplated for single families. I guess potentially they could have a parent or an in-law that would be staying with them. That's the case that happens sometimes. I think that you're referring to, but we've not accounted for multiple families acquiring and moving in together. There's not really, these home sizes are not big enough to accommodate 2,000 to 2,400 square feet. They're not really big enough to accommodate multiple families.
Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe you can legally tell people they can only have so many people live in a house. I believe that would probably be unconstitutional and illegal to try, even with a CC&R and private development, to say that everybody can only have so many people in a house.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. It's just, it's being evident that there are multiple families living in a home, regardless of the size of the house. That's just the unfortunate issue with the real estate here. The other thing is, let's see. I had one other item to cover. Oh yeah, so the other thing is, because you guys were saying that this is targeting millennials, between the age of 27 to 38. I am a millennial, and I'll tell you firsthand that a lot of my friends cannot afford this area, unfortunately. So that's why and based on research, is that more likely there will be 2 families living in a household, with at least an average maybe 3 to 4 adults in the house. So if your HOA can consider maybe restricting the applications for purchases, that'll be greatly appreciated, because that will definitely help minimize the traffic flow and be more consistent with your studies of being 2 adults in a household. My comment.
Okay. Did you have anything else?
That's it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Hello.
Hi, is this Danita?
Yes.
Hi, this is Candace with the City of Laverne calling for the Amherst meeting. Are you ready to speak?
Yes.
Okay, you are ready. You can start when you're ready.
Since no one from the city has been transparent, including city council and the planning commission, I just want the people who are participating in this meeting to understand why the traffic people, Christine Donahue and Brian, I apologize, I forgot his last name, they keep referring to LOS, even though CEQA doesn't require it. Well, the reason they refer to LOS is because the city general plan calls for LOS, which is why it is required in the traffic study. But my question is to Matt, the developer, why he thought using 10-year-old data from a traffic study in 2011 would be adequate for a housing project is such as large as it is. You know, 42 houses, 84 cars plus visitors is 100 cars easy. The slide that Brian had in his presentation showed that Amherst is already at a level grade F. And even without the housing project to be implemented in 2022, which is only a year away, and in 2040, there will be an increase in traffic. So why anybody thought that building that many houses would be conducive to our traffic situation? It is not just a matter of noise and emissions, but it is a matter of safety. As that gentleman said that he had a vehicle crash into his car. We have numerous vehicles on a daily basis run the stop sign at the Amherst Guava intersection. And that intersection is not even part of the 2011 traffic study. So I don't understand how a new traffic study wasn't ordered for this housing project to be included. That 2011 study does not include the traffic from the Laverne Village that was built on 2820 Foothill, which all those people come up Bradford and go either to Amherst or Bowdoin. And it doesn't include the future project that's going to be coming up on Fruit by just south of the Lutheran High School.
Danita, I'm going to ask you to stop for a second so Christine can address your question, okay?
Okay. Thank you. So just to be clear here, the project, a project-specific traffic study has been conducted, a current traffic study. The project did two things with respect to traffic counts. Current traffic counts were taken, however, it was during the pandemic, so that needed to be considered and adjusted. And also, we did look at traffic counts that were taken from the 2011 study. Just the counts, not the analysis, just the data. Those trip counts were adjusted to account for continued growth in the region since 2011, and also and then also compared as kind of a metric with the current traffic counts. So it's not that traffic counts from, I'm sorry, it's not that 2011 traffic counts were used to evaluate the project today. That 2011 data was then adjusted. We see regional growth in the San Gabriel Valley region every year, just like we do throughout Southern California. So we're able to adjust the traffic numbers to reflect that. They do the same thing in the general plan. When you're looking at your general plan traffic, it accounts for, okay, here's our traffic today, and we can look at what the expected growth is going to be through build out of the general plan date, whatever year that is. And that is then added and the circulation system is evaluated. It's kind of the same approach here. So a project specific traffic study was done. It was adjusted based on professional engineering standard. This is the same exercise that's being done for projects all over the state right now. We have to do these adjustments because we are in a pandemic situation and the traffic is lower than, you know.
Right, but even CEQA stipulates that current data has to be utilized even during the pandemic. I mean, so
we did use current data, but we've
using the COVID-19 excuse as to why current data wasn't collected.
Current data was collected.
Current data was collected. So we've also looked at current data and compared that. So current data was collected. We did actually do new traffic counts as well. And we still adjusted those upwards because we don't think that the current conditions reflect what the conditions would be if we weren't in a pandemic. So the city has been overly conservative here in, you know, being very careful and overloading the traffic to make sure we are really reflecting both what would be current conditions and non-pandemic conditions.
Okay. So what future cumulative projects have been factored into this, especially since the city is participating in the transportation corridor housing project, which is why this is coming up to begin with. I know the city council motion that the active transportation committee would get involved, and they would then determine if a new traffic study would be conducted. But the active transportation committee doesn't deal with VMT or LOS. They deal with pedestrian and cycling routes and paths. So I don't understand how we're comparing apples and oranges. They're two entirely different things.
Danita, I would say that's what the study by Rincon is doing, is the LOS and VMT. That's not what the council's not asking the active transportation committee to look at those things specifically. And back to Christine's point, these assumptions that we were very conservative are, I think it's important to keep remembering, it shows that the traffic on Amherst is at an A level today and will be at the future. Even if this project was twice as dense as it is, and there was 80 units, it wouldn't move the level of service on Amherst off of an A to a B, except for the intersections that are already impacted, and that's Amherst and Fruit, which is at the F. So the project itself is not overly contributed to that. That was all part of the analysis. And the cumulative projects that were looked at, I don't know if Christine knows off the top of her head, but they are listed in the traffic analysis, the other cumulative projects that they discussed earlier.
With the main entrance to this housing project being on Amherst, any point of Amherst that receives the letter F grade, it should automatically be, the number of units should be reduced strictly for that reason.
The F already exists today. Even without the project, no new development, it would still be an F. There's no increase. It's like a very minimal increase. So those have been reduced. We have F level intersections throughout the city. Pretty much every intersection along Foothill is an F, operating an F, just because of the number of cars that go through that on a daily basis, right? So that doesn't change with or without this project.
Well, another cumulative project that needs to be included is the 647 units going in on Gary and Bonita, which is on the border of Laverne, and those vehicles will most certainly be driving down Foothill.
So all I can tell you is that
or our side streets, as the other cars do as well. So
all I'll say is that this was done by a professional traffic engineer. It was peer reviewed by the city's traffic engineer, which is a completely different firm. And they found that the report that was provided was accurate and acceptable to industry standards, and it is appropriate for it to be part of this environmental impact report to be reviewed and decided upon by the city council.
I know the developer says that it wouldn't fit his timeline, but I think in the best interest of the residents, we realize that some sort of housing is going to be built at that location, but a new traffic study must be done. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right.
This is Cynthia.
Hi, Cynthia, it's Candace. You are, did you still wish to speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead when you're ready.
This isn't a quiet spot. So I just actually listened to Danita's part of it, and everybody just really got to step back and look at what all the original data which was used. That 10-year-old study has so many flaws in it. The high school was never addressed. The church was never addressed. It was done during during the third week of November, when traffic flow is actually a little lower, usually because of the weather. Smith's wasn't included. There's just so many things. Even with the current traffic study, Amherst and Guava was never ever looked at. And we live here at this intersection. We see the cars flying through the stop sign all day long. Somebody will end up running into Danita's house. That's just a matter of time. But what's killing me right now the most is that we have an S intersection on two ends of Amherst. There's no way, and I'm also an engineer, I do this stuff. There is no way that the Amherst Street, which has never really been looked at, is still an A, especially all the way back from 2011 or even earlier than that. 2003 is when the little Amherst lava study was done. The traffic here has increased so much. Somebody said that he's counting cars on his own street. We're taking videos now here just to show you guys how many cars go through the stop signs all day long. It's a total joke now.
Cynthia, do you have a question? Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. We need a traffic study done before this project gets approved. That's my question. Why are we being ignored? That's my next question. How come the people in Amherst and Guava never seem to be heard? That's my next question. This is completely ridiculous what I'm hearing right now. I do EIRs for a living. There isn't any mitigation for traffic at all in this EIR. In the IS, you already say that everything is actually at a significant impact. What are you going to do in the city? You are not representing us. You are not representing the representatives or the residents at all on this. To say you're going to do a traffic study 5 years after the project's done, fine. You're going to lose this neighborhood. This neighborhood is going to go down. This isn't going to help. I want to know.
All I can say. Go ahead.
We want a traffic study done now.
A traffic study has been conducted for this project. Yes.
What is the mitigation for the project?
As you know, you said you're an engineer, but I just want to clarify, you're not a traffic engineer, correct?
No, but in California, you can be a civil engineer, and I do have a background in traffic when I worked at URS, and you guys know that because I'm the one that fought really hard when you guys were going to do the Lutheran High School.
Okay, my only point was
I know about VMT, and I know about LOS, and I know how the numbers count.
Right.
Into the actual number that was even used for the nursery, you guys are actually deducting 107 vehicles from the nursery. We maybe get 4 cars there. I've been counting that for a month now, ever since I saw this stuff.
So again, all I can tell you is that the report that's been provided by Rincon and their consultants has been peer reviewed by the city's own traffic engineer, and they find that it's an accurate report. I'm not a traffic engineer. I can't tell you otherwise. But you said you understand VMT LOS. You know how the mitigation measures are going to be significantly different now in California because of the requirement for VMT being the sole thing to be
grabbing that. You guys are not coming here and really coming to it. We need to meet. You guys need to see what is going on. This is all a show. I can't even believe I'm hearing this. What other neighborhoods are you guys doing this to?
Okay.
And I'm sorry, but the traffic engineer, to go back to a 2011 traffic study, nobody's allowed to do that.
As Christine indicated, it was for the counts at that time. We recognize that the projects you mentioned were not built. Some of those were not built yet. We understand that. That's why the growth rates apply. That's how you do traffic analysis.
How do you approve? How do you as staff approve this project to go forward, knowing that this traffic study and this EIR document, your own initial study, are telling you the traffic impacts in the street are too high?
Again, the city's professional traffic engineers have reviewed it. Us staff are not approving the project, right? It's up to the city council to approve or deny the project.
You're recommending it. You guys are recommending it.
Right, because our professional staff have indicated that that's the case. I don't know.
Giving its blessing. That's the city giving its blessing, and you guys know that. You guys know that as professional environmental planners, you know exactly what that means. And there's not even any mitigation included in that IF or in the draft EIR. Even the draft EIR even goes into more detail about the impacts on even with the VMT. And you guys have said it, that everything's so high that it's just a little incremental worse. Well, the incremental worse puts it over the top here.
Christine, would you like to, Christine, is there anything else that you could add to her comments about mitigation measures?
Yeah, so it's what's important to keep in mind here is that whether it be under CEQA or even under general principles of traffic engineering, there has to be a nexus for mitigation. So we have to look at or conditions if we wouldn't be applying CEQA. There has to be a nexus. We have to look at the project's contribution to impacts on the circulation system. And when we look at, it's not to say that there's not adverse traffic conditions out there. We know there are adverse traffic conditions there. We empathize that there's pain and suffering in the circulation system. But we are obligated to look at the project's contribution to that. And when we look at that and we apply civil engineering standards, these are standards that have been adopted by the city, and they are consistent with the standards used across California in multiple jurisdictions. They are reasonable. They have to be reasonable by law. We don't find that the project is contributing to those adverse impacts in any substantial way that would require mitigation. So I think that is really why the city has indicated that they want this studied on a larger level, because this is really a symptom more of an existing condition than anything that this project is bringing. I did just want to note, there's been some things thrown out about like this many trips, this many vehicles. There's a presumption that this many trips equals this many vehicles. You gotta half those numbers typically. Each one of a vehicle going into someplace and coming back out of it, that's 2 trips. So
so how did you get 107 trips deducted from the nursery when there's maybe 4 cars per day?
So that's based, just like for single family. So it's based on the institute, as you know, if you've had some exposure to this stuff. Trip generation is based on Institute of Traffic Engineers standards. They do these studies all over the country, all the time. They look at how much traffic is generated by a particular use or wholesale nursery. This is the trip generation rate based on a per acre basis. There's always going to be a little up or down in anything. It's just like the single family. We have one rate that's used for single family. In the future, maybe ITE is going to come up with multiple rates, but right now for single family, we have a single rate. And for some projects, that's probably going to overestimate traffic. And for some projects, it's probably going to underestimate traffic. These are the standard engineering tools that we have, that we use, that we can apply to projects on a fair basis across jurisdictions.
But you also know that when it comes down to certain types of land uses, just like the nursery, you have the flexibility and the option to look at actual data, especially in a situation like this. The numbers you guys are using to deduct the trips from that nursery are so over the top high that you know that you guys could get sued. You guys better be careful. All of you guys just really better be careful. This is just incorrigible what's going on here. I can't even believe it. Seriously.
Do you have any other questions?
I suspect.
I know the city council is going to be getting a lot of letters, and they all better watch it too. It's just, this is incredible what I'm hearing. You're ignoring us again. And you know what? And just to put it out there, because a lot of people don't know, 2003, 2008, 2011, 24 to 2015, this street, Amherst, we went to City Hall. We've been complaining about this traffic on the street for that long. And at the beginning of 2015, we even went door to door with flyers to remind people it was 20 miles an hour here. This isn't just recent. I've lived here 27 flipping years, and we've been bugging you guys about this for at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. We're in your face about it. This isn't new.
Okay.
And that's a talk with Casey from 2003. I have that data. That was work. I granted that, but that was 2003, nothing like what's going on now.
Cynthia, I think we understand your concerns. Do you have any more questions?
I don't know, I'll have to put them in writing again, but Smith to Gary, you guys have got it. Somebody's got to answer that question about traveling down Smith and how that was not included in the traffic study. I just don't understand. Smith's going to be heavily impacted.
Do you want?
It's a one-lane street.
Christine, do you want to address the Smith situation?
So the intersections were selected based on the project's potential to contribute a certain minimum number of trips to a particular intersection. And so that particular intersection was not looked at because it wouldn't rise to that many trips. What you really want to do in a traffic impact analysis is you want to focus on your worst case potential conditions. So, and we talked a little bit about that earlier in the day. But if we instead diverted trips that way and studied that, we would be under studying other intersections. So it's not to say that there won't be any impact, but if we're not having impacts, if the project's not having impacts at the worst case intersections, it's not going to be having significant adverse impacts elsewhere.
Well, that's basically where the flaw is, because no matter what you guys studied this year on a COVID year, so really that data is no good. That 2011 report was so misguided and was very, very skewed in order to get one certain developer in here, which I'm basically seeing that again right now.
So the only thing, if I could pause you for just a second, the only thing used in that 2011 report, we used the traffic count data. That's it. None of the analysis, none of the other considerations in the report. Traffic counts are traffic counts. It's just raw data. That's all that was used from that report. We didn't rely on
focusing on the same intersection. And that was the big flaw then, was those same intersections. And the city here has never listened to us about how the traffic flow really is through this neighborhood. And they've never, even again, they've never reached out to us, you know, and
all right, Cynthia.
I mean, you know, and I'll put in that later. And FYI, the 800 radius from the center of the project doesn't even hit Bradford. So none of us down here on Amherst that have cars zipping by our houses all day long and going through the stop sign in front of our house, none of us were ever notified until recently. So more has to be done. A lot more has to be done. This really does not look good for the city. Just the whole transparency, and there's just so many levels here.
Okay.
And good luck, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, last caller.
Hello?
Hi, is this Ruth?
Yes.
Hi, this is Candace from the city of Laverne calling on the Amherst meeting. Are you still interested in speaking?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, so this is Ruth Mathias. So my concern with this, and I'm sorry, I did not get the beginning part of the meeting because I work. So if these type of things come out in the future, if we can get notified way ahead of time, because at work I cannot get my emails. So but I probably missed a lot of that, what happened. So this may be kind of redundant on the part. So for my understanding, the initial study or the initial plan for the housing was supposed to be, correct me if I'm wrong, 6 units per acre. No, correct me if I'm wrong. So it's zoned for 3, correct? And so now the number is
8.
Went to 33, and then the number went up to 42. So that just seems like a lot for this residential community. So this residential community
where we have the larger homes with the larger lots. And I've been here for 23 years. And to have that such in close proximity to where I live, it's going to be a lot. And if there's going to be one entrance and one exit coming out on Amherst, that's right behind my home. So if we open up our gate and try to exit out that, hook up a trailer, try to exit out that, if all of this traffic is coming down Amherst, that's going to be a problem because we can't just go back there and whip in, hook up a trailer, whip out. That's going to be a problem. The other part of it is they've just put in all of these bike lanes, all, you know, up around this neighborhood. So now if we go and ride our bikes, and because there's an increased number of traffic, that's going to impact our safety. And
Hi, Ruth. Sorry to interrupt, Ruth, but
here, and something happens, it's going to be a big issue. It's going to be a big issue for the city. It's going to be a big issue for us.
hi, Ruth. Ruth. Hi, sorry. Hold on one second, please.
Ruth, hold on.
42 homes
Ruth?
on that little 5.6 acres. That seems like a lot. So the other housing that went up, that took over that.
Ruth, please stop. Otherwise, we're going to have to end the call. Please hold on.
You know, I'm tired too.
No,
because I work
just
so
hold
hard.
on 1 second. Hold on 1 second, please.
Ruth, I'm sorry, but we've been on this meeting for 3.5 hours now. We've asked that everybody just ask questions. I believe that the questions you've asked have already been covered. This video is recorded and will be available on the city's website once this meeting is complete. You're more than welcome to review the beginning of the meeting that you missed. You're more than welcome to email your questions on to staff. But I don't think it's fair for the rest of us that have been on this meeting the entire time to have to try to re-explain and re-answer all the questions we've already been over. So if you have a brief question, we'll try to answer it. Otherwise, I'd like you to follow up with us after tonight.
Okay, so the question is, why did it jump up to 42 homes up from the 33 that it was originally? Why was that done?
Okay, I will explain that, and I did earlier with a longer reasoning, but the 33 homes was never an official proposal by the developer. It was a concept that was considered by the city council. Before this, when the developer proposed the application for development review by the planning department, it was 42 homes. That was back in February of 2020. Over a year, the project has officially been 42 homes. There was some immediate discussion early on as the city is the seller of the property, but that was never an official proposal by the developer. So I understand why there's some confusion on that 33 versus 42 number, but it was never really 33 units. It was just a discussion point early on in the process.
Okay, so currently our homes, we have one, so my lot is pretty big, so it's one home. So then that is going to impact our prices here, our residential prices. And you know, not a lot of people can afford to live in Laverne. So if they're putting these little matchstick homes down on that little street on Amherst, how is that going to impact our home prices?
So again, the developer in his presentation did talk about impacts to housing prices from his perspective. The city doesn't comment on housing prices. It's not something that the city's an expert on. That's a developer side, but he did talk about and generally said that it will, in theory, would increase the value of the existing homes because of the price per square foot that the new homes would be sold for. But that's his opinion of that. Nobody can predict exactly what's going to happen to your housing prices with or without this project. The housing economy, how the housing market is. It fluctuates pretty good, and so nobody's going to tell you for certain what would happen. But that was his presentation earlier on as well.
Okay, so then during the construction cycle, when they start tearing up the street to lay lines, to lay water pipes, to lay sewage lines and all of that, how is that going to impact the people that live here?
So there won't be many impacts to the Amherst Street directly in front of the project for those utility connections. There'll be some on Williams, some of it through the mobile home park actually. But just like any other construction project that happens in the city, traffic, the street wouldn't be closed to traffic for these type of work. Usually it'll be reduced to one lane for a very short amount of time with construction workers while construction is occurring, but you will still have access to your properties with the construction of the project if it's approved.
So I think that's going to impact the people that live here, so we're not going to be happy with it.
So there has to be some type of compensation or something. There has to be some leeway. I mean, something has to, there has to be some type of an agreement, because we're not going to be happy while all that construction is going on behind our homes.
Well, like I've indicated before, the city is responsible for doing construction in the city streets all the time, all over the city. And we are able to do it so it doesn't impact almost always, I won't say always, so it doesn't impact the residents. And that'll be the same case here.
Do you have any other questions?
No, did they take into consideration the people that are going to come? So the kids are going to have to go to a school, so they're going to have to go to the bus stop. Did they take that into consideration? Did they take into consideration food delivery, those cars that come through? Did they take into consideration mail delivery? Did they take into consideration Amazon delivery trucks? So that just adds additional vehicles into our area.
Yes, all of that's taken into account when a traffic study is done.
What would it be feasible to go back to do more, to build housing more to what is in the surrounding here, the residential neighborhoods? I mean, we have, one home per lot here. There really isn't any big residential unit except for on Foothill. The single family homes that were built up on the Lemon Grove Street, those are all huge single family homes. The other ones is at the end of Emerald and Bowdoin. Those are single family townhomes. But would there be any consideration in resorting back to decrease in the number of homes per site?
The developer's already addressed that in his presentation multiple times tonight. So again, that'll be on the video for your answer. But the short answer is no. The proposal is for the project that is before us at this point.
Okay, so my bad. So as a healthcare worker, I don't get home until 8 o'clock. So there you have it.
Well, after you rewatch the video, feel free to call me if you have any other follow-up questions.
And who is me?
I'm sorry, this is Candace from the city of Laverne.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Okay, so we actually have two more here, and Eric, you also have.
We're at 3.5 hours. I really think the people that haven't spoken already, I'd give them an opportunity, but I'd like to close the meeting fairly soon. So if you have somebody that called that hasn't spoken already, then please call them. But otherwise, that'll be the last comment.
Yes, these two have not spoken.
Okay, then let's, again, if you're watching the YouTube video and you haven't watched the whole meeting, please, follow up with us later, because we have answered most of these questions already. And we like to try to answer any new questions you might have. If you have been watching it, we appreciate it, so we can wrap the meeting up. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, is this Barbara?
Yes, it is.
Hi, this is Candace with the city of Laverne. I'm calling with the Amherst meeting, neighborhood meeting. Are you still interested in speaking?
That meeting's still going. I had to sign off a half hour ago.
Okay. So are you interested?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Hello.
Hi, Jeff. This is Candace with the city of Laverne.
Hey, hi, Candace.
Are you interested in still making comments on the Amherst neighborhood meeting? We are online right now.
And questions, please, only.
Questions.
I don't think so. I've been out of town,
Okay.
so I saw some of it on there today. I saw some of the questions I was going to ask were asked.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye. Okay, that's all for me.
Okay, I'm just gonna let Matt, if there's any, I've got some closing remarks before I end the meeting, but I just want to give you the opportunity to say anything else that you feel like you would like to say.
No, I want to thank you guys for hosting this meeting. I want to thank all of the residents and the neighbors in the community that came on. I appreciate all of their comments. I hope I answered them in as honest and straightforward way as I can. It's the only way I try to do things. So I thank you guys for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Okay, and Candace, anything else you'd like to add, or Christine or Brian, go and chirp in with us if you have anything.
Just the last part of the agenda was the tentative schedule. I'm not sure if that was part of your closing remarks.
No, please talk about that.
So the plan is for Planning Commission on March 17th at 6:30. We will go back to the Planning Commission and hopefully get a recommendation one way or the other to a city council meeting that we have tentatively scheduled, most likely the second meeting in April. That will be noticed and the neighborhood will be notified, and it will be, sorry, it glitched out. The neighborhood will be notified of that meeting whenever it is scheduled.
Okay, Christine, anything?
I have no further comments. Thank you.
Okay, and Brian, I'm assuming the same for you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you and sorry about the audio. Won't be using this computer again.
Okay, thank you. And so everybody else that's still on the line and anybody still watching on YouTube, just want to thank you for your patience with us. Again, this is the first time we've held a meeting like this, so obviously we've had some technical complications, but I think overall, I think we did a pretty good job in giving you all the ability to come in and be in the room. And you know, nobody turned on their video, which was interesting because that's one of the reasons why we did this process. Was we had comments that people wanted to see face to face and see their faces when they were talking. And maybe you didn't realize it, but you all had the ability to turn your video on if you chose to. But obviously that didn't work. So maybe we'll do a little bit more education on that ability in case that really was a request and people just didn't catch that. As Candace mentioned, the Planning Commission meeting will be next Wednesday at on March 17th, 6:30 p.m. We're going to hold that meeting the same way as this. So there'll be a link that a little bit differently, so you won't have to email us like you did on this time to participate via Zoom. There'll be a link on the agenda and on the city's webpage where you will do the registration, and then you'll get a follow-up email with the actual credentials to log on to the Zoom meeting. It is limited on the attendance, and there will be a deadline, probably closer to the meeting start, because now that we have a better idea on how this will all work, and encourage everybody to click or log on prior to the start of the meeting so we can start on time. And anybody else that's not able to participate via Zoom will still be able to give us their phone number and we'll call them like we did at the end of this meeting, so they still have an opportunity to participate. And lastly, as a reminder, that we did record this meeting. As soon as it's over, it'll be saved on our YouTube channel, www.cityoflaverne.org/stream, for anybody that wishes to view it at a later date. And thank you again for attending and have a good night. Bye, everybody.